morning, everybody. Welcome to our meeting today, January 11th, 2024. We are in person as well as virtual today at the Washington State Gambling Commission in Lacey. And it is 9:33 a.m. Today's meeting is being recorded. And since we're in this building, things are a little different as we have limited access to the restrooms, but we will be taking more frequent breaks to ensure that everybody gets a chance to use the restroom as needed. So we're going to try to take a break around every hour or so. And also in order to better manage the meetings, we've asked those who want to provide public comment to sign up. I believe there was a chance to sign up prior to the meeting and then this morning as well. Since this is new and something that we're just starting, just to make sure that everybody gets their chance to be heard. If you weren't able to sign up or missed that's how we're going to start doing things. Feel free to just speak up during the public comment period, and I want to give everybody a chance if they want to, but moving forward, that is the direction we're going to. So please keep in mind that you will need to sign up in order to provide comment. And we're also limiting public comment to 3 minutes per person. So please be mindful of that as well. When you're giving public comments, please state your name and who you are representing. If you have technical difficulties or questions, please email julie.anderson@wsgc.wa.gov. And we will be going into executive session around 11:30 today for about 30 minutes. So I will go ahead and call the roll. We have Vice Chair Julia Patterson here. I see Commissioner Sizemore, Commissioner Lawson, Commissioner Ibsen, are you here? Okay, and we have Representative Robertson. I see you here. Welcome. Do we have Senator Conway? Senator Holy? Oh, Senator Holy couldn't make it today. What about Representative Kloba? All right. She could also not be here today. So, all right. So we will go ahead and get started with tab 1, which is the consent agenda. We have the November 16th meeting minutes, November 20th meeting minutes, new licenses, Class 3 gaming, and the HPCR list. Do you have any?
I will move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. 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 All right, next we have the director's report with Director Griffin.
Good morning, Chair, Commissioners. So first meeting of January for January 2024. And with that, we have some interim staffing appointments that were made because as Gary Drumheller took the position of Deputy Director, that left the position of Assistant Director open. And so while we explore filling that position of Assistant Director, in the meantime, we have Jim Nix, who will be the interim Assistant Director. Tony Hughes will serve as the interim agent in charge of the Regulatory and Enforcement Unit, and Jess Lose will be the interim Special Agent Supervisor. And so those positions will be until June 30th of 2024. And then in mid-December, on December 11th, we launched our agency website. And so it has a new look to it, and really wanted to say a special thanks to licensees, to tribal partners, and who did participate in the various phases of testing and providing feedback. We very much appreciate the feedback because that helped us rework before we went live with some of the components that were being proposed on our website changes. And so, just like every new good thing, there are tweaks that need to be made. And so if you find something that isn't quite working, just please let us know and we continue to make those adjustments. But we are thrilled to have a new website and that project behind us. IT modernization project, you'll hear more about that a few times today, but we were successful. We met, actually, we completed our first milestone of collecting all of our business requirements within the time frame that we had originally allotted. And that did take additional extra work to get us there. But on December 4th, we did issue our request for information. And so that information is due back on January 15th. It was, again, a lot of work. Staff put a lot of effort into it. And I'm hopeful with this market research and market analysis that this request for information will bring back will hopefully prove very beneficial for us. So with that, that is all I have to report today. Thank you.
Paul Wogeman. Yeah. At the last meeting in November, we gave you some information about the GRIT Act, which is a federal act regarding some gambling addiction recovery efforts. You had some questions and talked about the process and how best to be able to intervene. So we've actually invited Cole Wogeman from the National Council on Problem Gambling, the government relations manager, to come and make a presentation to you, to he's brief and to answer all of your questions. So I think with that, Cole, go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the invite to be here. I have just a couple slides. We'll go through this quickly. I know you all have a lot on your plate, but I was asked to explain the GRIT Act a little and what we're trying to do with it. So first, thank you so much for having me. I am Cole Wogeman. I'm the Senior Manager of Government Relations at the National Council on Problem Gambling. We're based in Washington, D.C., and we're the national advocate for those who have developed or could develop a gambling problem. On to the first slide there. So first, let's talk about what the GRIT Act seeks to address, the Gambling Addiction Recovery, Investment, and Treatment Act. Well, we know that there's 7 million American adults who are currently suffering from gambling addiction, and there's no federal funds designated for problem gambling treatment or research. And that's different from other addictions like alcohol and tobacco and drug addiction, which receive billions from the federal government. There's already a tax on sports betting in the United States. A lot of people don't know that. So the federal government levies a 0.25% excise tax on every sports bet placed in the United States. And right now that just goes to the general fund of the United States. It doesn't have any direct place it goes to be spent on anything in particular. And things have kind of changed in the last few years. As you all know, in Washington, sports betting has become a national issue. This slide's actually a little outdated. We now have more than 35 states who have legalized sports betting. And it's the advertising and all that has really become a national issue. It used to be more of just a state issue. So go on to the next slide there. Thanks. So what is it that the GRIT Act would actually do? Well, the legislation would take half of that federal sports betting excise tax revenue that already exists, and it would put it towards gambling treatment and research. So 75% of that amount would be distributed to states for gambling addiction prevention and treatment through the existing Substance Abuse Prevention and Treatment Block Grant Program, the SAMHSA program. 25% would go to the National Institute of Drug Abuse to fund grants for research into gambling addiction. So that's the research part of it. And I'm sure that you all understand this, but we always try to make clear that the legislation is not increasing any taxes. It's not creating a new tax. It's simply setting aside a funding stream of a tax that already exists. And this funding stream has continued to increase as more states have legalized sports betting, as you can imagine. So we don't have exact numbers, but the last we saw, this tax is bringing in at least $100 million a year, probably closer to two or 300 million now that even more states have legalized sports betting. So you can go to the next slide. So why support the GRID Act? Well, it would be the first ever federal funding for problem gambling treatment and research. It would devote some much needed funds to states for gambling, problem gambling prevention and treatment. A lot of states don't have any money for gambling addiction. It would put us on par, gambling addiction on par with other addictions like alcohol and drugs by providing that federal funding. It doesn't increase any bureaucracy or taxes, like I said. And mobile sports betting is expanding quickly across the country. And the National Council on Problem Gambling fears that higher rates of gambling addiction might soon start to follow. Then go to the next slide. So where are we in the process? Well, coincidentally, the bill is being introduced as we speak. I'm tracking it. Was on the phone just this morning. It's supposed to be introduced right about now, so 12:30 to 1 p.m. Eastern time, which is where we're at. So as you can imagine, I've been all over the place this morning, but that's just by pure coincidence. I did not set this meeting. not try to be here during this. But the bill is being introduced by Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut and Representative Andrea Salinas of the 6th District of Oregon. Her district covers the Willamette Valley, the wine region in Oregon. And now that the bill is being introduced today, we're opening it up to co-sponsors. We're trying to get as many senators and representatives to co-sponsor the bill as possible, as you could imagine. So that leads me to my last slide here is what can you all do to be most helpful? Well, if you could go to the next slide. Starting, the most helpful thing would be if you all came out in support of the GRID Act. So you could issue a letter. I know that I talked to Lisa about this just a little, but to the state congressional delegation, both senators and House members, asking them to please sign on as co-sponsors to the legislation. That would go really far for us. We have other state commissions in New Jersey and Ohio and a couple others who are just starting to look at this and ask how they can be helpful or whether they should officially endorse it. So having you all go first would be really helpful to show how they can be most helpful. And then, of course, spread information on the GRID Act as you meet with other stakeholders. So that concludes my presentation. I wanted to be really brief. Happy to stick around and answer any questions. Because I'm shepherding this through introduction right now, I probably won't be able to stay if there's a bunch of public comments, or I'm not sure how the order you all do it in, but I'm happy to answer commissioners' questions.
Great, thank you. Do any commissioners have questions?
So thanks very much, Cole, for spending this time with us today. Where are you right now? I'm just curious.
I'm in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
The other Washington, the smaller one.
Yeah. So I have a couple questions. First of all, is there bipartisan support this time for the legislation?
There's not at this time. So we made a real concentrated effort to try to find a Republican co-sponsor. We got really close with some members, but they just weren't quite ready to sign on. We do think that hearing from the commissions in their own state will go really far in helping explain the importance of it and how it could benefit their constituents. So we are still holding out. We still have the goal of getting bipartisan support, but at this time, it's not bipartisan.
Okay. And I was just thinking, it's possible that we today might decide to support this legislation, see what happens, but I'm wondering about the wisdom of approaching the state legislature and asking them to pass, what's it called on the House floor? I can't remember anymore. A resolution. Thank you. Pass a resolution in support. I'm wondering if it would be helpful maybe for us to try to find a sponsor for a resolution of that kind in our
That would
state
be
house.
that would be tremendously helpful.
And has that happened in any state yet?
No, which is partially because this is still pretty new, but we have NCPG has 35 state affiliates, and I'm sure you're familiar with the Evergreen Council there in Washington. And so that will be something we'll ask them to help us with, just because it's hard to cover all 50 states. But if that was something that came to fruition, it would be extremely helpful.
Right, we have a couple of elected officials who are major champions in the legislature of problem gambling issues. Representative Chris Stearns in the House and Senator Steve Conway in the Senate. So I think that that's something that we might want to consider. The only other thing, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but is it obvious what the pushback might be from the Republican side, why they are reticent to jump on this since there's no tax increase? I'm curious what's being said.
So I don't want to just paint the broad stroke of Republicans, but the opposition is from some of the gaming industry who believe, this is what they've told us, that any federal involvement in this field will be the camel's nose under the tent, which will lead to federal regulation, would lead to other things that they're opposed to. So just to be clear, we're not calling for federal regulation. This is just about funding, addiction treatment stuff. But that is what we've been told, is that it's really about that. And their position is that this excise tax should just be removed entirely. They just don't believe the industry should have to pay it, and that it's an outdated tax. So I'm not going to argue their case because we would disagree with that, but that's what they would say.
Okay, thanks, Madam Chair. It's a bigger discussion.
Right.
Thank you.
Then I have a question that maybe you know or don't know, but it says, so we have this money and then there's 35 states that have legalized gambling. So how is the money dispersed among the states? Is there a methodology for that?
So I'm not an expert in SAMHSA block grants, but my understanding is any state that applies can get it, even if you don't have legalized sports betting, even if you don't have other forms of gambling. We always say at NCPG, there are people suffering from gambling addiction in every state, even if it's not legal. So any state that applies and meets whatever the SAMHSA criteria is, would be able to get funding. And I'm pretty sure that it's based on your per capita population. So it's not like, Rhode Island would get the same amount as Washington. It would be based on how many residents you have.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the commissioners? Right, do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, go ahead.
Oh, nobody signed up for this tab for public comment. What?
So, Madam Chair, for purposes of discussion, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
So I'd like to move that the Washington State Gambling Commission express its support for the successful adoption of the Gambling Addiction Recovery Investment and Treatment Act, also known as the GRIT Act, and that we notify our legislative delegation of that support if it should have.
Moved. I will second that. Is there any further discussion? Okay, is there a hand?
Me.
Oh, okay. Maureen, did you want to say something since this is our first day doing the sign-ups?
Yes, thank you. I've been home without power, but I'm back in the office today, so I didn't get a chance to sign up. But Maureen Greeley, Executive Director of the Evergreen Council on Problem Gambling and a member of the board of the National Council on Problem Gambling. We are one of those 35 state affiliates that Cole mentioned. First of all, I want to thank the commission for inviting Cole and hearing more about this. This has been years of advocacy work in the making to see this come to fruition, and is really the first time we've been able to see potential federal support to come to states, both to state health agencies and to nonprofit service providers. So Thank you so much. I also just want to share very quickly that the National Council will be holding its Advocacy Day on May 23rd, which is the same month, at the end of the month, that we will hold our Focus on the Future conference. So we will be doing a lot of work in trying to bring members, supporters, stakeholders, constituents together to support this and participate in Advocacy Day as well. So thank you very much.
I think Commissioner Patterson has a question for you.
Maureen, what about taking the bold step of asking, finding a sponsor in session this year to get a resolution on the floor of the House and
I
Senate?
think that is a fantastic idea, and you'll be hearing, I believe, from Representative Stearns later today on therapeutic justice court issues. He and I have been working very carefully together on that, so happy to talk to him, to Senator Conway, to Representative Kloba, to anyone that you believe in our state legislature would be interested in supporting a resolution on this. I think that's a fantastic idea, Commissioner Patterson.
I'd be glad to help you if you need that. I don't think you do, but I'm here.
Thank you. All right, so it's been moved and seconded. Any commissioners have anything further? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Anders, were you able to log on? Okay, right. Okay, I thought perhaps they were resolved. So, okay, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right, so tab 3 is the discussion on firearms raffle prize with Vice Chair Patterson. Taking charge.
Want me to take charge?
No.
Nothing like passing the buck over here.
You can present.
I just asked that
We don't have sound on Teams.
Okay, so I apologize. I didn't turn my mic on. Can you hear me okay?
We can now. Can you start from the beginning? Sorry.
I sure can. I
Thank you.
apologize. I'm the one that brought this topic forward, asking that staff provide us with some information so that we can have a broad conversation about the legislation that passed in the state legislature relating to the ban on assault weapons and whether or not that legislation has implications for those that we regulate here at the Gambling Commission. Whether or not any of our regulations need to be adjusted, or if there actually is a policy question that we commissioners might want to address. So at this point, it's just information gathering and discussion from my point of view, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. And I know Executive Director Griffin had done the information gathering, but I believe she had to leave to try to help Commissioner Ibsen get on the technical difficulties. So,
Well, here she comes.
oh, here she is. Sorry. So, Director Griffin, Vice Chair Patterson was just saying, we were doing some information gathering on the firearms. Sorry.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Chair, Commissioners. So you saw, you have the letters that have come in, and I did put together a memo. Since this is a discussion and this is not a rule discussion, this is just a discussion on a topic that commissioners requested to have a discussion on. It was my understanding that you were seeking some sort of policy memo. I tried to pull together all the parts and pieces that I thought were questions from the last month. So you have in your packet a definition as an attachment A of substitute House Bill 1240, which includes in that the very long definition of assault rifle, or excuse me, assault weapon. Then there was some questions about what the court challenge is to the substitute House Bill 1240. And according to the AGO's website, while there is some court challenges, no court has held any part of substitute House Bill 1240 to be unconstitutional. So again, at this point, the law is in effect until that occurs. And I have, and so that information is pulled directly off the AGO's website. In terms of where we stand with our current rule regarding awarding firearms as a prize, Block 230-06025, it is my read of the rule that what is only authorized by the state or federal laws can only be issued as a firearm as a prize. So I am not reading that RCW 41390, which is part of the substitute House Bill 1240. There are exceptions, right? First of all, 941-390 prohibits any person in the state from manufacturing, importing, distributing, selling, or offering for sale any assault weapon. And there are some exceptions, which are in your attachments, C and D, but those exceptions do not include awarding a firearm, an assault weapon as a prize in exchange for as a raffle prize. So licensed firearm dealers would be, first of all, I don't even think in my read of 941, I don't even think there can be an assault weapon that a licensed firearm dealer, though I'm not extremely well versed in this RCW, but it was my read of the bill that licensed firearm dealers couldn't even have those in stock any further in Washington State 90 days after the bill went into effect. So if a licensed firearm dealer did get a certificate to award somebody an assault weapon in the state of Washington as a prize, that firearms dealer would be in violation then, according to my read of 941-390, which has criminal penalties. So I'm summarizing by saying I believe that the rule currently requires the awarding of a prize to be in compliance with all other WACs and RCWs of the state of Washington. Now, there is also, I attached the history of WAC 230-06025. There's been very little changes to the rule, and then we did in 2019 verify the licensed federal firearms process for awarding firearms as a prize through the certificate process to verify that licensed firearm dealers in Rocky Mountain Elk did follow that process and making sure that the transfer was in accordance with state and federal law. So that is, unless you have any questions for me, that is, I think there was one more outstanding question and that I didn't put in here is if you did seek to make any sort of rule change, whether it would be a repeal or an amendment, just as with any other topic, you can initiate that by a motion, and then obviously a majority of 3 is needed to put that into play. So if you did want to initiate for repeal or amendment or any sort of rulemaking. The process would be the same. You would just need to indicate to staff, what it is that you would want to amend if you did choose to go in that direction. Any questions?
So if the court challenged, the legislation is currently being challenged, and if that challenge is successful, then does a state legislature ban weapons? And we'll go back to that. At that point, is there something that this body could do that would that would affect our current regulating industry? So in other words, let's repeal. Can we still decide that entities?
Could you turn on your microphone, please?
Oh my gosh. Yes, I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Not used to this system here. Apologize.
So I think the question was, in summary, if the commission were to repeal the rule that authorizes firearms to be issued as a prize. No. It was, sorry, one more time. If the assault weapon bill were to be found unconstitutional
Yes.
and we amended the bill and we amended the rule,
Well, right now, whatever state law is applies to the situation that we're responsible for. But if that law is repealed, then what can we do to move forward?
so if that law is repealed, then charitable nonprofit organizations could offer assault weapons because they become authorized in the state again.
Okay. So at this time, they're not authorized to be able to do that, but if the bill is found to be unconstitutional, they could move forward with that. And then what could we do to prevent that?
You could repeal the rule. You could put certain parameters around what type of weapons you would want
Mhm.
to be awarded as a prize.
So we essentially could take parts of the legislation that are now being challenged at the court, and we could incorporate them into rulemaking.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Griffin?
Sure. So it sounds to me that our rule, there was no exception made for raffles to allow for a firearm that was described in the legislation. So our rule changed when this bill became law, because what was legally able to be transferred changed. Is that accurate?
Yes, because the rules currently state that if the prize awarded from state or federal, so and 941 is going to be
quite a few years, but state or federal law has been changing, and therefore the parameters around that have shifted over time.
So, yeah, so I guess my and I'm just gonna use pens, blue, black, and red pens. At one point, you could get any one of them, and our rule said that you could get a certificate for a pen. Our rule still says you can get a certificate for a legal pen. And then since that period of time, red and black pens are no longer legal pens. So now, although our rule hasn't changed, you can't get a red or a blue pen through a raffle. You can still get the whatever black pens that are still legal. Is that, I mean, that's just utilizing a simple object. I happen to just have one in my hand.
We're into a hypothetical that I'm struggling with a little. Generally, yes. All right.
Okay.
So
Fair enough.
at
You
a
don't have to go
high
any further. That's fair enough.
hypothetical level.
Okay. Thank you.
potentially That would be one way to look at it.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Or I can go to the public comment. We did have a couple people sign up this one. Okay. Let's see, Ryan Bronson, are you here? Okay. Kirk Strubble, virtually, it looks like maybe you're just answering questions too, or did you want to testify?
Yeah, I would like to make a statement if that's all right. Thank you for the opportunity. First of all, my name is Kirk Struble. I'm the regional director with Ducks Unlimited for East and Southwest Washington. As such, a lot of my day-to-day and my work with the volunteers is actually dependent on raffling firearms. Nonprofit organizations, especially ones that are like Ducks Unlimited, where the vast majority of our members and supporters that come to our events are hunters and outdoors people. They're typically blue collar people. The draw for the opportunity to win a firearm, which is almost in every circumstance a hunting firearm, a rifle, a shotgun, something like that, is a big draw for our events, and it is a huge moneymaker to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, at least for DU in the state of Washington. And I know, I won't speak for other organizations, but I know that to be true for a lot of the other nonprofits in the outdoor and hunting spaces as well. Furthermore, there are implications with things like the Pittman-Robertson Act, which is an excise tax that firearms manufacturers pay when they transfer a firearm. So it is paid on the manufacturer's end. Should we be prohibited from raffling firearms? That would impact WDFW's budget extensively. I believe in 2021, they were awarded $8.1, maybe $8.3 million in Pittman-Robertson's funds from the sale and transfer of firearms. Furthermore, Ducks Unlimited has an annual ask over the last 5 or 6 years. We've needed to raise $2.2 million to do the funding, or to get the funding for the work that we do in the state of Washington. And again, I'd just like to reiterate that raffling firearms are a critical means of us being able to raise those funds. And then the last thing that I'll say is we are always in compliance with state and federal law when it comes to the firearms that we offer and how they are transferred. If an individual wins, they are required to get that firearm from a federally licensed firearms dealer. They have to pass all the background checks. They have to meet every aspect of the laws that have been passed in Washington, which now includes things like taking a safety course and certifying that they've done so. And there is no workaround to that. For example, I believe in the last meeting, Vice Chair Patterson mentioned the hypothetical of someone getting a certificate and being able to maybe go to Idaho to get a firearm that they couldn't get in Washington. Federal firearms license dealers will not transfer a gun that is not allowed to be owned in Washington to a Washington resident from another state. So that's really all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions should any commissioners have one too. I'll do it to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Just to clarify, Kirk, I believe, so you were discussing with the taxes all firearms, right? And I think Commissioner Patterson, were you focusing on assault weapons or all firearms, or where is this discussion heading?
This discussion might be over unless, I mean, it kind of depends on you three because my tenure is up here in a few months. But I don't know if you want to do something proactively to prevent organizations from raffling guns or raffling assault weapons in case this court challenge is successful. If you wanted to do that, I don't know, or if you just wanted to wait and see what happens. I have a point of view about the proliferation of firearms in American society, and I just didn't want to play a role in expanding that here as a gambling commissioner. For years, we've been passing rules affecting the raffles that occur for Rocky Mountain Elk and Ducks Unlimited. I must admit that for many years, it didn't dawn on me that they were raffling a lot of guns. Because I'm not a part of that culture, I didn't think about it. And it just, I wondered if I had been somehow or other complicitly adding to the extraordinary horrific burden on our American society of the availability of assault weapons and weapons that can kill many people by one person in one place. I wondered why these organizations had to make their money on guns. I mean, are Ducks Unlimited and Rocky Mountain Elk, is there anything else that their members might be interested in seeing at a raffle besides more guns? These are the thoughts that went through my mind because I have a point of view. But then I learned from staff that the state legislature has addressed this to a certain extent. So I thought it would be an interesting topic for us to hear more about. That's it.
Anyone have anything else they'd like to add?
No, I appreciate all the, sorry, thank you, Bud.
Yep.
I appreciate all the work that staff has done on this, as well as the information that has been provided by the nonprofits. I still want to go through this a little bit more thoroughly, but for today, I don't have any questions.
Okay, what do you mean? I go through it. You want to keep it open? Or-
I think we can fairly close it for today. I just want to have more time with the materials.
Okay, so you want to put it on a future agenda?
Perhaps, yes.
Let me know. I'll come sit in the audience when you do that.
So, okay.
And I'll clarify that comment only by saying that I think that there's an opportunity here for the commission in our rules to be more clear. But I want to make sure that that's exactly what I'm reading here in light of what our rule says and what the RCW says.
All right. So, Commissioner Sizemore? Pressure.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. So, and I appreciate the dialogue, the conversation, and, the proponents of current policy, the information that they provided to us. I just want to make sure that we don't get outside of our lane or ahead of the legislature on the topic. So, there's a debate to be had on whether that's the best path forward or not. Should we need to, we can have that discussion at a later time. But I think there are a lot of issues already, big old agenda today, and I would imagine going forward. So I think the legislature put in a tremendous amount of work last year. I think I saw about 80 to 100 amendment proposals during the process last year. And I know at least one or two of them included like an effort to allow these named weapons to be able to still be in raffles, and the legislature denied those amendments. So I think that I think our rule works with, making sure that it's a legally obtainable firearm in the state. So I don't think that we've created a loophole, and so that I think we're okay right now.
Okay, great. So I guess what we'll do is just kind of move on. I very much am on the side of Commissioner Patterson with not wanting to feel like we're doing harm by putting more firearms of any sort out into the public. But I understand your positions that we're in line with the legislation and, keeping it at that for now. And so perhaps we just kind of watch what happens and keep our eyes and ears open. And once you get done reading the statutes better, if you want to bring this back to the table, we can do that. But
Thank you, Madam Chair.
thank you. Appreciate the staff for gathering all the information, comments that were made. We'll move to tab 4, which is the Special Olympics of Washington with Tony Czar, Special Agent. Should I say
Yes.
correctly?
Good morning, Chair Levy, Commissioners, ex officios. My name is Tony Czar. I'm an agent assigned to the Regulation and Enforcement Unit, and I have the privilege this morning of making presentations with respect to the materials found in tab 4 of the commission packet. They all involve Special Olympics of Washington, which for convenience I'll refer to as SOA as I proceed. I'd like to start with the program review, if I may, followed by reporting on the results of SOA's Spring 2023 raffle, and finally introducing SOA's request for their 2024 Dream House raffle. In 2023, I was assigned as the lead agent to conduct a program review of SOA. And I just want to mention at the outset that this portion of the presentation does not require any action by the commission. It's based on WAC 230-07080, which requires a review of Group 4 and 5 nonprofit licensees every 3 years. And part of the review entails presenting a summary of qualifications at a public meeting. For those that don't know, SOA is an accredited affiliate of Special Olympics Incorporated, organized in Washington in 1975 as a not-for-profit corporation. They are currently licensed with an enhanced raffle license, along with a standard raffle license, both of which are valid until March 31st of this year. SOA's mission is to provide year-round sports training and athletic competition in a variety of Olympic-type sports for children and adults with intellectual disabilities, giving them continuing opportunities to develop physical fitness, demonstrate courage, experience joy, and participate in the sharing of gifts, skills, and friendship with their families, other Special Olympics athletes, and the community. The primary source of funding for its activities are donor contributions and fundraising events.
For the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2022, SOA had 28 active voting members, including 4 officers, and SOA conducted 4 membership meetings during the 2022 fiscal year. I want to provide both a recap of their program delivery in 2022 and offer some highlights. SOA served over 12,000 athletes. They held over 180 competitions. They had 4 state games, offered 23 official Olympic-type individual and team sports, and all of that occurred throughout 16 local programming regions. In addition to its athletic competitions, SOA conducts programs called Healthy Athletes and Unified Champion Schools. In terms of Healthy Athletes program highlights, 6 screening events were conducted statewide, which included 240 health screenings, and they provided 12 inclusion trainings to healthcare professionals. In terms of Unified Champion Schools program highlights, there are 131 Unified Champion Schools across the state. Roughly 2,800 students received the message of respect and acceptance, and 35 unified competitions were held statewide. In all of their programming, SOA spent approximately $5.6 million on their direct program expenses for the fiscal year 2022. We gathered and reviewed a tremendous amount of information during the program review, and numerous steps were taken to ensure SOA is functioning in accordance with their bylaws and continue to meet the definition of a charitable or nonprofit organization. We verified their programs exist and are being supported. And from our perspective, based on our review, we determined SOA is suitable for continued licensure. If there are no questions, I'd like to turn to the results of SOA Spring 2023 Enhanced Raffle. Okay. At the November 2022 commission meeting, you approved a plan submitted by SOA to conduct an enhanced raffle. The grand prize drawing was held on May 12th, 2023, and was attended by commission staff. The grand prize offered was a dream house located in the Puget Sound area, or an annuity of $4 million paid over 20 years, or a one-time $2.8 million cash payment based on 84,000 tickets being sold. If fewer than 84,000 tickets were sold, the grand prize winner would receive a choice between a sum equal to 50% of the net raffle proceeds paid as an annuity over 20 years, not to exceed $4 million, or a one-time cash payment of 70% of the annuity value, not to exceed $2.8 million. In terms of the numbers, there were just over 27,000 tickets sold. Sale of raffle tickets were approximately $3.3 million. Prizes awarded were just under $1 million, and expenses were approximately $2.2 million. And net proceeds to SOA was roughly $789,000, all of which will benefit SOA by supporting program activities. There were 2 early bird drawings, a multi-ticket drawing and an add-on drawing in addition to the grand prize drawing on May 12th of last year. The grand prize winner received $425,000. SOA also awarded over 4,000 additional prizes valued from $25 to $10,000. We conducted an inspection of the enhanced raffle, which included verifying the money from all ticket sales was deposited, contacting numerous winners to confirm that they received their prizes, and we reviewed SOA's gambling records to verify accuracy and compliance with WAC. No discrepancies were noted. And we neither received any complaints with respect to the enhanced raffle, nor were there any state or federal regulatory actions taken. And ultimately, we confirm that SOA operated the enhanced raffle within the plan approved by the commission. I also wanted to take a moment to mention that SOA's Fall 2023 Dream Adventure Raffle concluded last month. Commission staff were present for the grand prize drawing at SOA's Seattle office on December 2nd, 2023. And although we haven't reviewed the independent financial results or the records yet, I can report some preliminary results. SOA sold approximately $565,000 in tickets. They awarded approximately $187,000 in prizes, and net proceeds to SOA was approximately $160,000. Again, unless there's any questions, I can turn to the proposed spring 2024 Dream House Raffle, which will require action today.
Any questions?
So SOA is requesting your approval to conduct a Dream House Raffle later this spring. WAC 230-03152 states that you may vote to approve a bona fide charitable or nonprofit organization whose primary purpose is serving individuals with intellectual disabilities to conduct enhanced raffles when they meet the requirements of the law and submit a plan as set out in the rule. Tab 4 contains SOA's plan, and I would submit that based on the foregoing information that I just presented regarding our program review, that SOA satisfies the requirements set forth in the rule. The purpose of conducting the proposed raffle is to provide the necessary resources for SOA to enhance its programming and grow its athlete base. If approved, the enhanced raffle will begin later this month on January 22nd, and the grand prize drawing will be conducted at SOA's office in Seattle on May 10th. Their plan is to conduct an appreciation drawing, 2 early bird drawings, and add-on drawings in addition to the grand prize drawing. The grand prize being offered is a dream house valued at $9 million, a $4 million annuity, or $2.8 million cash option. SOA plans to award over 4,000 other prizes, including cash and merchandise. NZ Consulting Incorporated is managing the enhanced raffle for SOA. Incept Corporation is the contracted call center to receive enhanced raffle tickets for SOA. And Mary Doe, the Chief Operating Officer of SOA, who's here with us today, will be overseeing the enhanced raffle operation. And with that, I will turn it over to Mary and SOA's VP of Accounting and Administration, Mark Sine, who are present here.
Good morning. Happy New Year. Thank you, Chair, Commissioners, and representatives for allowing us to be here today. It's hard to believe that with your support, we started this raffle 10 years ago. This is a decade ago. And with your support and the individuals that have participated in the raffles, we've been able to maintain, sustain, and even through a pandemic, expand our inclusive health, sports, and leadership programs for thousands of children and adults across the state. So I really just wanted to say thank you for this continued support. As we gear up for our 50th anniversary, which is next year, hope you will come out and party with us. Again, just wanted to thank you guys for your instrumental role in allowing our organization to diversify our revenue in a different way and celebrate the work that we do. There are more athletes, individuals with IDD across the state that are waiting on the sidelines, and with this raffle, we'll continue to be able to expand those services. So just wanted to thank you. And Tony, you're great. You should come work for Special Olympics Washington. That report was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the commissioners have any questions or comments? A motion?
I move to approve the 2024 enhanced raffle request for Special Olympics of Washington to conduct a Dream House raffle in Western Washington.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Gibson. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Happy New
Good
Year.
luck.
Commissioner,
Thank
I'm sorry
you.
to hear if you voted aye or not. I'm sorry. Or is there any nays? I mean, he seconded it. You did hear him?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So motion passes. Sorry, I just want to make sure. So we will take a break. Appreciate your report. Thank you very much. And we will head into let's do a 10-minute break. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Welcome back, everybody. And we are going to jump past tab 5 for right now, and we're going to go to tab 6, which is a proposed rule repeal for final action on bingo with Lisa McLean, the legislative and policy manager.
Morning, Chair, Commissioners, ex officios. Tab 6 is about is taking final action on a proposed repeal of a rule of 230-03155. We have proposed repealing this because of the fact that we have other rules that deal with this. And furthermore, this issue, if you get to high level of gambling receipts, and furthermore, we really haven't received a large bingo operation license for application for a long time. So if you were to take final action and accept our recommendation after holding a public hearing, this repeal would take effect 31 days after filing with the Office of the Code Revisor. That's it.
Any other commissioners? No? Any comments? Right, do we have any question?
Madam Chair, I move to take final action on the staff proposed rule repeal. So Act 230-03-155. The effective date would be 31 days after filing with the Code Revisor's Office.
Second?
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Do we have any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you. Let's see. Next. Let's go to tab 7, the petition for discussion and possible filing of the nonprofit raffle rules.
Okay, Lisa McLean again. This is tab 7. It's been a petition that was brought to us by a coalition of nonprofits regarding their raffles. I'm not going to go through all of the things that they're proposing. Basically, their proposals are to keep up with inflation, to change some of the conditions about member-only raffles, and to modify some of the records retention requirements. In November, we brought this up for discussion and possible filing with written language for it, working with the coalition. And at the time, one of the commissioners asked, what was the discussion in September that brought about the initiation of, especially the petition regarding raising the limits on the high value prizes when a raffle prize gets to exceed $40,000 or when it exceeds $300,000 in a license year. I went back, we looked at the transcript from the meeting in September. There really was no discussion. We had left it, we considered that issue to be a policy issue, put it in front of you, and you all said, yes, go ahead and initiate rulemaking on that. So we have included in the packet the request that they wanted to increase that from 40,000 to 80,000 and increase the per annum from 300,000 to 500,000. You also have in your packet this time a letter from Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Columbia Basin, where they tried to address the question that was raised in November regarding why would you raise that limit. There are people who are part of the petition here. Kurt, I think, is here. Our colleague Bronson from Rocky Mountain Elk, and I think there's Tiffany Brace from Nonprofit Association of Washington, and maybe somebody else.
Nello Pisnich.
Nello could be here.
Are there any questions?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Huh?
Is the amount that the petitioner is requesting, these increases, and they are asking for these increases ostensibly in order to keep up with inflation, is that amount, the increase the same? Does it make sense that it is equivalent to inflation? Is there a correlation there, or?
Does anybody from the petition, any of the petitioners want to speak on that?
I mean, the increases, the amount of the increase that's being requested in order to keep pace with inflation, how did you come up with that amount?
Kirk, did you? Oh. No problem. Don't want to put anyone on the spot, just.
I will note that in the letter that we received from the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and the Boys and Girls Club of the Columbian Basin, they do note that the average cost of a new car increased by 13% from 2013 to 2023.
Mhm.
So they didn't reference other things, but they did, they're saying 13%.
They referenced the increase in the cost of purchasing a new car.
Yeah.
Is that somehow relevant to what?
I think it is because sort of the 40,000 is maybe the number that's there is because what's an average cost of a car.
I see.
So, and remember that this is about coming and asking you all to approve it,
Mhm.
right? And having, so it's, that's what,
Right.
you want to consider those every time a car over $40,000 is offered, they'll have to come to you and ask for that.
I see. Of course. Thanks for putting that in perspective. But is there anything else to address my question of how they came up with these numbers other than, okay.
Oh.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yep.
Any other questions?
I had the same question or concern as Commissioner Patterson. Is, are these numbers actually tied to inflation? And I think that, I saw it somewhere and I'm looking for it now. When was the last time, when we set the limits at 40 and 300, what year was that done?
Director Griffin helped me here, but I'm pretty sure that I knew this last month, but in November, is the 300,000 was changed in 2013. The 40,000, I believe, has not been changed at all since it was created. Is that, am I remembering that right, or is it the opposite of that? Yeah, yeah, I think that's what it was. Oh, Bill, Bill, our subject matter expert is here too. Bill McGregor.
Bill McGregor, Special Agent Supervisor, Spokane. I believe you're correct. It has been a long time. 40,000 has been in place since in the 80s. I started in 89 and I believe it was at 40,000 then. The 300,000 was raised at some point and I don't recall the exact year.
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
Thank you.
It was already. In 2010, it was, the rule was 40,000 for a single prize and 80,000 annually. So,
Okay.
so we increased it to 300,000.
That was in 2010, you said, that we did that increase to 300?
Said it was, yeah, it would have.
So it was 80,000 in 2010, and then I'm looking up the next one to see if when we changed it to 300,000.
So 2012 is when the rule was last amended.
Yeah. Working to see what he mentioned.
Madam Chair,
I don't have that.
So it was in
Oh.
2012 that it went from 80 to 300,000. I won't be able to, I know that it's been, I would agree with Bill, it has to be prior to 2008 when we did the whole repeal, that 40,000 was in effect for the single prize. But in 2012, we raised the cumulative prizes from 80,000 a year to 300,000 a year.
Okay.
So I could also just type in, what's the value of 300,000 in 2012? What is that in today's dollars?
I already have that pulled up.
Thank you.
And can I just say is that the original rule was adopted in April 1983 and established the single prize for $40,000 cap.
Okay.
Okay, so Bill is right that 1980, it was in the 80s that the 40,000 cap for a single prize. 80,000 was established for a single year, and then that was raised to 300,000, as the director said, in 2012. I found the paper.
Okay.
what did you discover with your analysis?
Well, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, $40,000 in 1983 is $125,000 today. And $300,000 in 2013 is $400,000 today.
Additional questions?
No questions.
I have a question,
Don't?
not a question, no.
You have a comment?
Sure, I don't know whether there's public comment or any of that stuff on this, but
Nobody signed up.
okay. So this is just my perspective. Thank you, staff, for trying to go back and track down the conversation from that initial meeting that I missed. So the big thing, and I think my hesitancy last meeting on moving this forward and getting more information was that I find it very valuable to have these organizations come before us and be able or need to make a pretty comprehensive raffle plan to protect them and the consumers and to provide us with good information. I think, I don't know whether 40,000 was arbitrary in 1983 and was something that they were like, well, nobody's ever going to give away. That was a house maybe, whatever. So,
Yeah.
so there are, I appreciate the history, but for me, it's more about at what level today with this set of commissioners do we feel that we want folks to be putting together a comprehensive raffle plan and coming before us to get our approval. So, I think, I was thinking that somewhere in the neighborhood of 60,000 for a single prize. And 400,000 annually was a number that in my mind I would like to see it move to rather than 80 and 500. I just think that there's value in somebody, if they're gonna raffle off a $80,000 vehicle or $79,999, I'd like to see that. And with our options of remote meetings, remote testimony, I think that we've made it easier. I mean, I like seeing people in person, but at least they do have the option to present virtually if needed. So, yeah, everything else I'm fine with. I'm just a proponent of 60 and 400 as those limits rather than 80 and 500.
Madam Chair, I'd like to be able to talk a little bit more about this with staff's analysis of what, if we had been tying this to inflation, what the actual number would be. And it might be very close to what Commissioner Sizemore is recommending. It would be, from my point of view, it might make sense to be able to tie it to that, so that in the future, when requests are made, we have a precedent, or we have history of tying it to a rate of inflation, maybe. Anyway, we can talk about that, but I still would like to know to what extent inflation has affected this amount. And then consider Bud's idea of going to 60 and, what was it you said?
400.
400, and see how close that all turns out to be.
Okay. Anybody else have anything, or do we want to try to put together a motion?
I move we file the proposed rules for further discussion.
I have a question before I second, I guess. Are we going from 101 to 102 here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
The 102's the language we'd really like to
Right.
move forward with, without having to go back and refile a 102
Right.
the next time. So with that, I think we've got to we probably need to refine what those numbers are today.
And staff do a quick analysis of the inflation rate. I mean, Mr. Lawson has done some of her work, but I'd like to see what you find out.
So do you want to take a break and then
We-
we can Google
However
it?
the chair wants to handle it, we could take a break or come back to it. I mean, that's,
Okay, and then did you, just so I make it sure I understand, you said, I thought I understood you to say that you would like to tie it to inflation in the future. So are you looking?
No.
Oh, okay. You just want to verify the number is in line.
I want to know if what they are requesting is somewhere in the ballpark of what inflation actually has been.
Okay.
And then I'd like to see, Commissioner Sizemore intuitively has thrown some numbers out there. I'd like to see how that correlates to his numbers. And then we could talk about it.
One thing I find interesting is that I'm pretty sure 80 to 300,000 for the cumulative annual was not a factor of inflation. That was simply like modernizing probably
Right.
how, these activities were transpiring. And so who knows, but my guess is that the commissioners at the time were like, yeah, this is this outlandish number we don't think very many people are going to exceed. So this is probably about right. So I think I don't know if anybody can, and maybe Bill can add to that, but I mean, certainly 80 to 300 was not a straight inflationary increase.
I hear you. But when petitioners cite inflation it just would be interesting to see how accurate it is. That's all.
Okay, so can we allow,
Bill have.
oh, sorry, Bill, I didn't see you there. Go ahead.
So my recollection, Lisa, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that you had done a calculation when we started this, and I believe 400,000 or just over 400,000 was about where the 300,000 did become. 80,000. I mean, from 1983 to today, I think is 40,000 has certainly gone over 80 if you're tying it to inflation. But again, we did not try and tie these to inflation. This is only at what level do the commissioners wish to see raffle plans before people move forward on exceeding these limits. So we did not intend or try to tie it to that. The proposed numbers are strictly from the petitioners. And again, we said this is a policy decision for you and not a staff concern. So.
I just want to clarify, Madam Chair, I'm not proposing that we tie this to inflation. It's just that I can't, it's difficult for me to pull a number out of thin air. Petitioner has recommended numbers or asked for certain numbers. My colleague has made a recommendation. I'd like to know where the inflation rate lands in all of this, just for purposes of a broader discussion.
Excuse me, Chair. So I have on usinflationcalculator.com, using that inflation calculator, using the variables of 1983, was that it? Yep. And 40,000, then in 2023, the item would cost $122,370.28 for a cumulative rate of inflation at 205.9%.
So 40,000 today is 122,000?
40,000 in 1983.
In 83.
Would be $122,370.28 in 2023 for a cumulative rate of inflation of 205.9%.
Okay.
And then for the 300,000, the cumulative, using the variables of in 2012, 300,000 in 2023 would be the same as $398,140.20 at a cumulative inflation rate of 32.7%.
Wow, that's surprising for me. So petitioners are asking to
go to 80,000.
80 and 500. My colleague is recommending 60 and 400, and inflation would be 122,000 and 398,000. Right? Okay, that helps. Thank you.
So you had, what is your motion? I guess that was kind of where we.
My motion was that we file this so that we can talk more.
Well, but we have to file numbers.
Okay. Well, thinking on the fly here, based on what I've just learned, I'm inclined to agree with the petitioner. I mean, they're calling out inflation as being the main reason why they want this increase. They asked for an increase that is half of what inflation actually has been. So it seems, help me out here, it seems pretty reasonable to me.
But their 500,000 is more, right? 'Cause the number was 398.
Oh, you're right.
Their single award is half, and
Their single award is the one.
I would think
Okay.
we could do
Yeah.
80 and 400, but I know Bud wanted to keep it down to 60 just so people could come and talk to us.
and talk to us. Yeah.
I see what you're saying, Madam Chair. The 500 is a bit more than what inflation has been, $100,000 more. So from my point of view, the 80 makes sense, and maybe 400 makes sense, like Commissioner Sizemore is recommending.
Mr. Sizemore said 60, I think, not 80. So I don't know if if that's going to cause problems or what.
I'm talking about the top number that he recommended.
Right, the 400, yeah. So, okay. Someone want to make a motion?
I just have, I guess, one more point for discussion. Yeah, I would agree with keeping the top number at 400 simply because I know, there was this adjustment in 2012 bringing that number from 80,000 to 300,000, but that was far ahead of what inflation would have been for that number. So in 2012, that number would have actually only been about $200,000. And even if we were looking at that 1983 to 2023, that $80,000 would only be $250,000. So I want to keep that cap down, because if we are truly adjusting based on petitioners' argument that there's been inflation, we do have to keep that in mind. You know, we had this big jump in 2013 that was not based on anything that has sort of gotten us up to where we are now. As far as the bottom number, the single prize limit number, I'm comfortable with Bud's proposal of 60. I do agree with him. It's nice to have them come in and talk with us. But I definitely do note that 40 and 83 is now 23 today.
I'd like to make my motion clearer. I think at this point in time, my motion would be proposing that the raise be to 80 and 400. Just so that we know what we're talking about here.
Okay, so we have a motion to move the limits to 80,000 and 400,000. Do we have a second? I'll second it. Any further discussion?
I would offer an amendment to the motion for a single prize limit. And this includes other pieces other than this, right? Staff is viewing this motion that the package is more than just this 40 and 300, but we all are on board with the other components. Is that clear?
I think your motion needs to be clear that you're only seeking to make changes to a specific rule that's in the packet. 230.11.067.
067, okay.
You're wanting to, I think, file all the other rules as is, but change. Then your motion should so reflect.
Okay, so my amendment to the motion would be the threshold of 60,000 for single prize, 400,000 in cumulative prizes, and a license year that triggers submission of a raffle plan and commission approval in WAC 230.11.067, as well as the other components, this package as presented.
Okay, the motion has been
I'll
I
second
offered
Bud's
an
motion.
amendment. Okay.
You're gonna second the, okay.
So
So now there's two motions on the table.
no, there's only one. Just an amendment.
It's an amendment.
Just the amendment. So and the one thing, I guess, and I don't want to beat it to death, but in the time that I've been doing this, because of these thresholds, I've learned about Perry Institute. I've, and the work that they're doing in the trades and, in trade school. We've seen requests come forward and, based on, having the discussion, we went back and looked and made sure that all of the firearm transfers were done appropriately and found 100% compliance with that, except for the one that happened to have closed and it was impossible to verify. So, when I think about kind of our role and responsibility and keeping this business, legal and honest, these nonprofits the same, I feel like we shouldn't be creating levels that we don't see these folks hardly ever. So I'm going to be fine either way, but I think that the 60 versus 80 on the single prize strike straight balance, and it's not a direct CPI component.
You know what they say, when you have the votes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you accept the,
We're gonna have to vote on it, right?
I don't know.
Yep.
Do we vote on
It
this?
looks like
Amendment.
he has the votes, so I'll just accept that as a friendly amendment then. How's
All
that?
right.
All right.
So, okay, so we have a motion that's been seconded to increase the single prize limit to 60,000 and the cumulative prize limit to 400,000, amending WAC 230.11.067. And then accepting
And 065.
and 065. And accepting everything else that goes with that, right? That, okay, so all those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, motion passed. Thank you. The- Let's move to tab 8. Adjacent card rooms with Lisa McLean.
Okay, Commissioners, this is tab 8, which we call the adjacent card rooms related to WAC 230.06046. The staff has developed clarifying language to ensure that adjacent card rooms operate as separate and distinct licensed business premises. In order to do, we also, in developing that language, we realized that this rule, while it's in the chapter that applies to all licensees, that it's better to belong in the licensing chapter, which is 23003, because of the fact that it's sort of, we need to check these boxes prior to giving the license out, right? So it basically, what we are suggesting here, that you take a couple of actions. We would ask you to file for a new rule, 230.03182, which is an amended version of the current rule that is in chapter 6, that would basically have clarifying language about when a card room can be adjacent to each other, okay? And at the same time, a second thing is to authorize us to file for a repeal of the current WAC 230.06046 on an expedited basis, on the basis of the fact that it would become redundant because it would now exist in chapter 3 and not in chapter 6. Does that make sense? And then the language is there. It just has some clarifying language in terms of on what basis you can have structures next to each other.
We need 2 motions for this, Madam Chair?
I believe so, yes.
We're not what we originally started out doing, although we left ourselves some options. We originally thought we could amend this. We started looking at it. We really said, why is this in this chapter that applies to all licensees? Why isn't it in this licensing chapter? Because it's really what we would do. We would first check and make sure all these conditions exist, and then we'd give a license. We want to move it, and in order to move it, we need to introduce a new bit rule and repeal the old one.
Housekeeping.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be best if they were tied into a motion so that somewhere down the line, like passing the repeal?
I don't see what the harm would be. Maybe staff can help us.
Suzanne, is there any reason?
So I don't see a particular harm either way. The question is just the clarity of the motion itself, and whether the two are combined clearly in your intent.
Motion. I'll just call it the 06.
That you are requesting staff to initiate the repeal of the 06 rule upon the enactment of the, sorry, I'm losing the numbers of the correct rule. Yes, I think you can do that together, if that is your intent.
Okay, I think we do have someone that wants to make public comments on this. Right away from the sign-in procedure just because this is the first day.
Hi, I'm Eric Person, the owner of Maverick Gaming. I have, I think, 22 of the 37 card rooms or so in the state. And this rule, from my perspective, came about as a result of our application for two new card rooms we're building in Kent, Washington. From our perspective, we don't really have an objection to the rules as Executive Director Griffin has described to me. I do just have a language which goes to the intent of the change, which is a language question, and that is when you read 1 and 10 of the 230.03.182 of the proposed language, it just says that the first part says, it says of this section and we're licensed on the effective date. Much better for me. We'll be right over there. Well, so basically, subsection 2.1 says that existing card rooms are grandfathered in. And then if you read the bottom part of where it says number 1 and the 2 of this section will take effect upon issuance of a new license. So we just want to make sure it's clarified, not when my existing card rooms come up for renewal, they would have been treated as a new license, because like I have 2 of these existing card rooms that I purchased. They're adjacent to each other, Chips and Palace and the 2 Caribbeans up in Kirkland. And so obviously that'd be devastating, because then, they would have to be closed under the new guidance. So as long as that's not the case, then I don't really have an objection to this. But if that is the case, then I have a big fight. And I'm going to be going. And so that's my public comments.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we do not consider renewal to be new licensure. So we can all breathe. And but we would consider new licensure to be the purchase of assets, something that would trigger a whole new license, right? Which would mean the purchase of a new to purchase the assets of an existing licensee, or to have a substantial change, a change in substantial interest holder that's outlined in WAC 230.06, like a change of ownership. Yep. That would not be something you could do as a change of ownership, but rather an undisclosed substantial interest holder is somebody who's buying more than 50%, and that was not a disclosed substantial interest holder prior to that.
Okay, so to make sure I understand, let's say there was a divestiture or a sale, that would force then the sale to be treated as a stock sale, because otherwise it would trigger a new license, in which case then the 2 card rooms that are adjacent to each other, which have been here for 30 years, would not be able to exist as they currently do. Is that correct?
Potentially, but we have to still always make sure that they meet the definition of established food and beverage business. And so that was the intent moving forward, is that they continue, should there be something that causes a new license to be issued, then they should be looked as any other new applicant. So in terms of a hypothetical, if something triggers a new license for your existing licensees that have been grandfathered in, they would need to follow the rules as if they were new to this. They wouldn't be covered under the grandfather.
I understand. Then from my perspective, that causes great harm to the existing assets. And while I have no issue with a grandfathering and new rules for new builds, I think that I purchased those assets under the condition of these existing rules, and it causes me great economic harm because it damages my ability to ever sell these assets. And so I would ask the commissioners to think about that as they're thinking through making new rules for card rooms, which I understand, versus card rooms that already existed, have existed for many years, and were purchased under this context. Because what that does is it doesn't ever allow me to exit or sell, because I have to maintain the existing license.
So I think that if you look at subsection 2 of the current rule, 230.06.046 says subsection 1, which outlines the current, it's stated in the opposite way. These subsection 1 says card rooms may not be adjacent to each other if licensed premises do A, B, or C. And then subsection 2 says subsection 1 of this section does not apply to non-house banked Class F and house bank card rooms physical locations that have any of the features listed in 1 of this section and were licensed on the effective date of this rule. So I would ask then, I think that this would be something that if you're grandfathered already and you are issued a new license, I think the same thing applies with how it's currently written. But I'll look to.
Could you explain that again for me? I'd appreciate that. I know you understand it, but would you explain that
Really?
again? I'm looking at it.
I think that what we're trying to clearly articulate.
In subsection 2 of 230.06.046.
Right. I think subsection 2 of the current rule, I think it gives us the ability to still only apply these exceptions who were grandfathered in when this rule was put into place, as long as they don't become new licensees in the future already.
Right. So then what Eric's saying is that if he sells his business, then someone has to be a new license and it could risk shutting down.
Right. So I guess what I'm trying to point out is, even though we're making it very clear in the new rule, I think the old rule
Okay.
already has the ability for us to say, no, if you sell your business as a grandfathered business and it wasn't compliant with sub 1, I don't see that the current rule continues that grandfather clause to infinity.
Mm.
But that's just my read of that.
Okay. I mean, personally, I think this is something that we need to look at more and make sure that that's the case for sure, and compare the two rules, because I really don't want that type of situation to occur, where something could, but maybe now I feel panicked. Thank you, Eric. I'm just kidding.
Well, it's good you brought this forward.
Yes, yeah.
It's just that if it's not the intent of the rule change, then I think it's easy enough to clarify it. Like, that's all.
Right, and the intent of the rule change was to take something that's been around for a long time and obviously has questions about what it does and does not clearly authorize, and make sure that it clearly. So that is why we carried in and trying to make it more clear in the new language. And so we will, if I think what the commissioners are asking is staff to take another look at the existing language, verify that this really is something that a new license is issued to a grandfathered location does or does not get to continue to be grandfathered. That's the question.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't get to be grandfathered under the existing language, then we just need to let you know so that how we proceed forward with the new language.
And then to be clear, from Maverick's perspective, I understand from my understanding, the intent of the rule is that to make sure we have clarified rules for new build card rooms, which I'm building too and can, and I have no issue with them as described or as proposed. I just have obviously an interest in protecting the existing assets I have. And that's my comments.
Mhm.
I'm just going to I'll weigh in here, I guess, and seek confirmation, I guess. So if I'm looking at 0646 sub 2, the last kind of line here, it says we're licensed on the effective date of this rule. So that means so they were licensed then, and we don't count renewal as a new license. So that right there essentially, does that have the same effect and same meaning as the new language that is in 03-182 will take effect upon the issuance of a new license. So both those things effectively seem to do the exact same thing. Grandfather, unless issuance of a new license in the new language, and in the old language, we're licensed on the effective date of this rule. So both those seem to do the exact same thing to me. So the existing rule already says this. And is there a different reading?
I think what petitioner or what Mr. Pearson's worried about is that perhaps it's not going to carry over. Could we change that sentence in the proposed rule? It says subsection 1 of this section, and were licensed on July 1st, 2018, which was the effective date of the old rule.
Yeah, I don't know crafting that, whether that
Yeah.
construction works. I mean, to me, it seems like slightly different words to do the same thing.
It is, but what I think
Sure,
he's
but
worried about is that if,
sure.
if 06, or the one in section 6 goes away, and then the new language says of this rule, which is the one in section 3, that would have an effective date as of 2024, and not an effective date as of 2018, which I think is the intent.
Right.
So now I think I didn't hear that as a concern, but I hear that as a concern now. Do you still have the concern that, see, I understood your concern to be something different, that your other properties that have been grandfathered, if you were to decide to sell those today, they may not be grandfathered into the future. Is that your concern or not?
My concern is, yes, in a nutshell, at the time when I wish to divest the assets, if they're going to lose their status as adjacent card rooms because of a new rule change, then I won't be able to sell them and they'll have to close. Or you could try to, depending on how language is finally written, you could have someone do a stock purchase of those assets. But of course, that means that the purchaser will inherit liability. They'll inherit all the liabilities of the business, which means then that business is worth a lot less. And so my ask is only that we recognize all of the adjacent card rooms in the state of Washington, not just mine, although I happen to own them all, and allow those to be grandfathered in so that my businesses aren't economically harmed at the time when my son someday wishes to sell them. That's my ask.
So I see your new issue.
Yeah.
Then I think to me is what Commissioner Sizemore has indicated, that the existing ones are currently grandfathered. The intent always was is they continue over to be grandfathered. So I recognize that we need to make that adjustment to this rule. Then setting that aside, then this other issue, I don't and haven't read 230.06.046, the existing rule, to mean that any future license changes at the grandfathered locations continue in as long as anybody who owns them wishes to have adjacent card rooms.
Exactly. I think there's a big difference between doing a stock sale where the entity or the licensee stays in place, and doesn't actually change, versus doing an asset sale where now you have a new licensee And this section should apply to the new licensee.
The stock sale could trigger a new license, right?
Depending on how.
Potentially.
Could,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Potentially.
Yes, it could.
Which is the intent, which is why the gambling commission exists, right? Like if we have an existing licensee who would be grandfathered under this rule, they already have a license. But if we have some new person or entity either taking on the license or getting a new license, the whole reason why the gambling commission exists is to examine that person who would be licensed in the state. So
It's just that we should acknowledge that this is a paradigm shift. Previous history with the Washington State Gambling Commission allowed these buildings to be created next to each other and have access in the back of the house. And in the case of Caribbean, some in the front of the house. And that was the thought process at the time when these buildings were created and the licenses were approved. And there's probably been a multiple of owners throughout that time. And I'm the most recent. And sometimes in life, things change, and that's fine, and rules change. And like I said, I don't have any issue. I am the one building card rooms, and I'm building two, and there will be adjacent. And I have no problem with the totally segregated wall and lack of access between the two buildings. My only concern is the existing assets, and I think that we should acknowledge the fact that should these rules be adopted, we're changing our perspective on how adjacent card rooms should be located in the state and treated. And I'm only trying to protect the ones that were created previous to this paradigm shift so that one day I'll be able to sell them. That's it. You know, I don't think that it's a huge ask. I'm not even sure what the need for this language is other than the fact that Maverick, applied to build these two card rooms and, perhaps there's some political pressure because there was never an issue previous. But now there is. Why?
there's no change. This has been in place since 2018.
Oh, but there is a change. She's suggesting a rule change right now. That is the purpose of what we're talking about, is a rule change to clarify language on how adjacent card rooms should be treated and what the rules for adjacent card rooms are. And it's coming about, they're standing because I am building two card rooms in Kent. Had I not been doing this, I doubt we'd be standing here in this reality of this world right now, but I am. And so we are making new rules, perhaps, and all I'm asking in the process of doing that you don't economically damage my existing assets or inhibit my ability to sell them one day. That's my ask.
So even if we were to take this new rule off the table and not proceed with the new rule, subsection 2, my read of subsection 2, the current rule does not. We can explore this further.
And I don't disagree with you, Executive Director Griffin. What I am making sure the world understands is that the rules for adjacent card rooms are being proposed to change. And that world of card rooms in the state of Washington, when they're adjacent, is not going to be the same as it was previously. And I'm just trying to make sure the assets I have in the past, and it's being changed in a way, in a viewpoint less favorable to the adjacent card rooms than previously held. And that's fine, that happens. And I'm just trying to protect the assets that were created in a different world previous to these proposed changes, because it wouldn't be a huge stretch to think in the future, why should these card rooms that are adjacent have this back of the house access? And perhaps we should change this rule. And then all of a sudden, like, those buildings aren't card rooms anymore because of the changes that happen. And then they go away. And so I'm just trying to protect the existing assets. I'm trying to protect the existing assets of their right to be sold and traded at like a fair market value. And trying to protect these jobs. It's not like we've gone from 37 card rooms to 120 because we went the other way, from 120 to 37. And it's because of decisions like this and choices like that that are not business favorable to card rooms. We should just say that out loud, because that's what's really happening here. We're not making the card room industry easier, making it harder. Not sure why, because we fund everything in this room. I'm pretty sure.
What exactly is the change that you are opposed to? Like, what is the language in the proposed rule that you are opposed to?
Oh, actually, no, let me go back. In the existing rule, because this is merely a reflection of the law as it stands now. What is the change?
Oh, of the existing rule, had there not been a proposal for new language, there would be no request at all. But in this case,
But the existing rule would still apply.
the existing rule would still apply, but the dynamics and the politics of the reality of which these rules set would not have changed. But they have changed because we've requested new language.
But the new language is the same as the old language.
It's not the same as that
It is the
language.
same as the old language.
No, it requires an entire segregation of space, which was not previously required.
That's required under the current rule.
No, it's not.
Yes.
The existing card rooms do not have that.
It says existing card rooms cannot be adjacent to each other if each premises shares inside public access and has employee access between the two businesses and shares windows or similar structures that allow them to see into each other.
Okay, so what has happened in the state of Washington for a very long time?
I don't want a history recitation. I just want the pinpoint of the change
The pinpoint,
that Maverick is opposed to.
okay. Like I said, I'm not opposed to the new language that's proposed.
But that's why you're standing up here today, sir.
No, it's not. What I'm standing up here is to say that in the environment where this language is being proposed to change in a way that is less favorable to adjacent card rooms than currently exist.
What exactly is less favorable in the proposed rule? The exact language that is less favorable. Existing rule. Let's talk about the existing rule because essentially the proposed rule
Someone provide me the
mimics
existing
the
rule,
existing
please.
rule.
That's existing. This is existing. Now, close that.
All right. There's inside public access. Okay. I have no problem with A.
Of the existing rule.
Yes.
Okay.
I have no problem with B.
Okay.
And each is fully separate and distinct. There's a solid wall with no internal access. Okay, so the main change is that, and I understand the intent, but when it says there is a solid wall with no internal access between the two premises, that's for clarification. I think, I mean, I don't want to speak for Director Griffin, but I believe that's just for clarification. Because the reality is that's not exactly how it's applied in the state currently, nor has it been for 20 years.
Right, because the current rule says that there has to be no employee access between the two licensed businesses. Sorry, my computer keeps. And they cannot share windows or similar structures.
Yes. Each licensed business must operate as an independent commercial stimulant. We have no issue with language C.
Okay. Of the existing rule.
There's no, C shares windows. I have no problem with C there. And if you go through the existing rules, A, B, and C have no issue. That's the definition. Adjacent card rooms was supposed to sign it. I have no problem with 2 and 3.
Okay, so you have no problem with the law as it exists now?
No.
Okay, and then the proposed rule, what change in the proposed rule do you have a problem with?
Each licensed business. See, I'm looking for my only issue is really what I said before. Is which when you go to 2.1, my ask is that we recognize grandfathered card rooms.
Which if we made that one change that was discussed earlier, where we take out the language licensed on the effective date of this rule and change it to licensed on the effective date of July 1st, 2018, which was the effective date of the existing rule, then your existing business would be grandfathered in. That would be clear.
And that would be fine.
Okay. Is there any other issue that you have with the proposed rule?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Was that your recommendation initially?
Yeah.
Change the language in that way?
Yes.
Okay.
So are we to where we can make a motion or where are we?
Yeah, we can make a motion, I believe, just with amending it with the new language. And then just filing that proposed language for,
Well, in that case, I move to file the proposed language with the one change in the fourth sentence of subsection 2, taking out licensed on the effective date and saying licensed as of July 1st, 2018. And created as a new rule in WAC Chapter 230.03. And I move to initiate repeal of WAC 230.06.046 on an expedited basis, given that the new rule will make the existing rule redundant.
Upon enactment, you want to say that?
Oh, upon enactment, yes. Amending my prior motion. We'll make the existing rule redundant upon enactment of the new rule.
Right. Second.
okay, been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 All right, motion passes. Thank you, everybody. And now we are going to go to executive session for, I believe, 30 minutes. We'll be back here at, say, 12:20. 35 minutes. Great. Welcome back, everybody. It is the afternoon session of the commission meeting at 12:22 p.m. We are going to start with tab 5, which is the update on centralized surveillance with Executive Director Griffin, Bill McGregor, and then Phyllis and Kim from Maverick Gaming.
Thank you, Chair. Since this is a PowerPoint presentation, I'll just sit here if that is okay, or would you like me at the podium?
That's fine.
Thank you. And so I'll be giving this presentation together with Bill McGregor. So this is, next slide, please. This is just an update as indicated on the initial slide on where we're at with our discussion on centralized surveillance. And so just as a refresher, like where's this topic? How do we get to this topic? So in January of 22, Maverick Gaming petitioned for rulemaking asking for centralized surveillance. And then in February of 23, I was almost going to say earlier this year, but that was so last year, sorry. Seth made a recommendation to deny the petition before we had gotten to the 102 stage. So during the course of that conversation at the February meeting, Maverick Gaming decided to withdraw the petition with the understanding that staff would work with them on this topic over the next 18 months. And so that is why we are reporting back to you today. And I will say that we have been having monthly meetings for the most part, especially as of late with Maverick Gaming. And so they're going to give a presentation, though we did, share and coordinate information with them during the course of this preparation update for today. So next slide, please. So really not the objective, but the follow-up. The purpose of our presentation today is just to provide you an update of the research that we have done to date. In terms of, since this is our presentation, I'm going to summarize the state's research that we've done to date, and then just also summarize the what we intend to have with ongoing conversations with Maverick and their request to have centralized surveillance monitoring authorized within Washington. Next slide, please. So what we have found is we have found 2 states that have authorized centralized surveillance. I'm going to speak to the first state, or one of the states, and that is Colorado. And this is one of the states that
We lost mics on Teams. It looks like somehow you got muted.
Okay, so thank you, Nicole, for letting us know that.
You're welcome.
So Colorado is one of the states that authorizes centralized surveillance, and they have authorized it through their internal ICMPs, internal minimum control standards. And so not through rulemaking, but through internal control standards. Though their internal control standards do go through an outline process in rule, the board can set those internal control standards, the minimum standards that have to be in place for all of their licensees. And then they have to be approved. But if the board, I believe it is at Colorado, chooses to amend those internal control procedures, there is a process, again, as outlined in rule. They have to give so many days notice that they're seeking to make a change to their internal control procedures, and then they can receive comments, decide how to proceed with that comment, make those changes in whichever fashion they choose to make, and then post and give notice to licensees as to the changes that they must comply to. So when we looked at their laws and rules in regards to centralized surveillance in Colorado, we did find that their statute does authorize limited gaming in only 3 cities, of which those 3 cities are in 2 counties. So just as a little bit of background as I get more into the details. So what is in the minimum internal control procedures regarding centralized surveillance are a couple lines, and one says that each casino must have a surveillance room in-house. Exceptions would be for commonly owned casinos, which are in the same county, and surveillance rooms must be within one of the commonly owned casinos. In terms of the staffing requirements, then it just says that staffing requirements for those combined casinos has to follow the minimum staffing requirements. But if you have combined surveillance rooms, basically the staffing requirements are based on the number of combined gaming devices amongst all commonly owned facilities. And gaming devices in Colorado equates to slots and table games. And outside of that, there are no specific rules or RCWs that we could find that talked about the requirements for combined surveillance, other than it can happen as long as they're in the same county amongst commonly owned facilities, and then the staffing requirements. Any questions about Colorado or so far in the presentation? Okay, and then next slide, please. Bill's going to talk about Nevada.
So Nevada has allowed some centralized surveillance rooms. It is only through a variance. The board chair, they have in their rules, the board chair may exempt a licensee from complying with casino surveillance standards. The criteria, there is no set criteria, and that those requirements are determined by the board chair. So they have set some, I believe, but there's nothing in statute or rules. And then the location of the surveillance room is dependent on annual license gross gambling receipts or revenues. If they have more than 15 million, they have to maintain a surveillance room on the premises and be manned at all times. If it's less than 15 million, then they have to maintain a surveillance room, or they have to maintain in a secured location, which is on the premises. So it's similar to a surveillance room. I think under their definitions, it gets a little strange, but it's not required to be manned at all times. So those were the things, but again, it's by exception in there. Right now, a majority of the ones that are approved, I know we have the ones up north that Maverick Gaming has, that are not next to each other, but a majority of the ones approved in Nevada right now are casinos that are next to each other with common ownership. So
Thank
next
you.
slide.
Next, yes, thank you. So just to summarize, the approaches that that states have used to authorize centralized surveillance, Colorado, they have their requirements in internal minimum control procedures. And then Nevada does authorize a variance on a case-by-case basis. Next slide, please. I think
And
Bill's.
there's some topics for future discussions here. Some of the things that'll definitely have to be, and that is location of the monitoring room if we allow centralized surveillance. I believe both Colorado and Nevada require that be on a licensed premises. So it may be centralized, but it has to be on one of the licensed locations. Another topic for future possible discussion would be is the ratio of centralized surveillance rooms to house bank card rooms. So how many card rooms would we allow them to monitor in a central location? And then that also comes up with the location of them, or that is, Colorado's within the same county. Nevada, since they don't have, it's only by variance, they're having them be next to each other for the most part. And in the staffing requirements, how many staff would they be required to have in the room? And then who'd be monitoring the entity? So there's some licensing issues as far as, is the monitoring room a separate entity or employees of the card room itself, and who can do that? So those are some issues that are going to have to be worked through. Equity of, compared to all card rooms in the state, not just Maverick properties. When we get down to who's going to be able to monitor the entity, how's that going to look for common ownership or identical ownership? There's different rules in different states on that. And then the other one that we recognize as a future topic, and that is what is the network requirements? What technology will be required to be used in order to do this remote surveillance rooms? So next slide. We'll open it up. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to try and answer them. From our standpoint, our research as far as what we found in Colorado and Nevada, and then, or we'll turn it over to Maverick Gaming and let them do their presentation.
Madam Chair, so we've discovered that this is happening in 2 other states.
Yes. I'm sorry, I lost your audio. Sure.
Are the tribes in our state doing anything like this? Are any of them coming together? And do we have examples of tribal practices here?
To my knowledge, Tina can correct me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, there is no tribes doing centralized surveillance now.
Maybe not centralized, but not completely centralized. Do you know if maybe a few of them have come together to do surveillance, or?
We can explore that and bring that back to you if that's something you're interested in.
Well, if I think that the tribes are successfully managing to do anything remotely like this, we should be aware of how they've been successful.
To my knowledge, they are not, but we can certainly check and make sure.
Any other questions?
Quick one. Just so I kind of understand the current landscape, anybody that's doing surveillance is an employee of the card room and licensed individually. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and the surveillance room essentially, or surveillance process and equipment is an entity of the card room, so not an individual license for any surveillance company or anything like that.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, we require 4 independent departments, surveillance being one of those.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Let's see, we have Maverick also giving a presentation with Phyllis Ermy and Kim McCabe.
Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Phyllis Ermy. I am the Executive Director of Compliance for Maverick Gaming. And I appreciate the opportunity to present on this specific topic, as it is really important to me. Next slide, please. Next slide. First, I will start with our overview. We're proposing centralized surveillance monitoring for our Washington locations. Centralized surveillance monitoring would provide the opportunity to observe card room gambling activity from individual card rooms to a centralized surveillance room. All existing surveillance equipment, the cameras, the DVRs, software, anything like that, will be remaining at the card room itself in a existing surveillance room that is secured. Our objective is to provide public safety and the safety of our patrons and our team members. That's number one. Centralized reporting, training, supervision, communication to provide consistency throughout our property surveillance monitoring is really, really important to us. Provide the gaming agents with real-time access to the surveillance to enable better response time to criminal activities, timely investigations, and video evidence collection would be wonderful. Next slide, please. One more. Thank you. Our proposal is to better protect the gaming operations and the public. So this is the reason why we're proposing this centralized surveillance operation. It is an efficient and effective way of maintaining security, ensuring regulatory compliance, providing a safe and enjoyable environment for our patrons, efficient and consistent operations across all the properties. We're designing to ensure that the gaming is conducted in an honest, competitive, and safe environment by providing public safety and would be increased by having centralized surveillance. Because we're not only going to have the surveillance observer, but we would have consistent supervision as well. So we would be able to have that team there to make sure everything was done as it's supposed to be, providing a larger footprint than our current model, with it's just one observer in the room by themselves. Also allowing a Washington State gaming agents to be able to review the footage, obtain the necessary video, provide all the enhancements that we feel would be more efficient for everybody. Next slide, please. Continuing with our proposal, drawing from our successful experience in other jurisdictions, employing centralized surveillance, we propose the establishment of a streamlined and efficient surveillance system for card rooms. Centralized surveillance operations, we could share expertise seamlessly across all card rooms. This approach facilitates the swing exchange of information, ensuring uniformity in reviews and reports. This in turn increases public safety and the safety of our guests and employees. We'd like to build a 24/7, 7 days a week, centralized room with multiple observers, and including supervisory personnel, which is very important. Our proposed centralized team would be comprised of our existing surveillance team with additional team members that have specialized skills in order to make sure that we cover more and can do more for our card rooms. Property management is trained or would be trained on the system so that they can quickly remote in, do what they need to do. If they're at the property, they can take care of any emergency situations that happen until the person from centralized can get there to handle any type of equipment errors or things like that. All properties have and will continue to have their own totally functioning operation surveillance system. Sorry. Our centralized room will act as the main viewing room and will have remote viewing of all properties. Next slide, please. So this picture kind of shows our proposal of what a Maverick centralized surveillance room would look like. It will help the casino to ensure compliance with the regulations and maintain a safe and secure environment for our guests and staff. A manager in the room with all the observers, ensuring procedures are followed every time, being consistent, gathering information, getting things done the way it needs to be. Next slide, please. Some advantages of centralized surveillance: standardized processes, specifically with incident response time. Implementing standardized process across card rooms has shown a decreased incident response times by 15%, enhancing the overall security posture. Supervision and training cost efficiency. Centralized supervision training results in cost savings of approximately 10% and 20% improvement in staff proficiency, contributing to more effective surveillance practices. Centralized viewing and reporting, enhanced incident documentation. Centralized report writing improves the accuracy and completeness of incident reports, leading to a 25% reduction in investigation time and more thorough analysis of gambling activities. External surveillance access, improved oversight and collaboration by allowing gaming to look at some of the things that they want to look at, the gaming agents, that will allow them to get more accurate in what they have to find immediately, therefore increasing other investigations and things like that. Next slide, please. More advantages of centralized surveillance: enhanced security. It allows for the comprehensive monitoring of the entire casino premise, including gaming floor, entrance, exit, allow us to look at more, which would prevent theft, cheating, and other criminal activity. Quick response time to incidents: having all surveillance monitors and operators in one location enables a swift response time. It helps the security personnel intervene properly, prevent potential problems with escalating. With multiple personnel in the room, each can focus on specific tasks to enable a timely response. And then the efficient monitoring, I go into that a little bit more detailed when it comes to observers who can quickly switch from different cameras, the ability to track movement. There's more people helping each other. Coordination with security personnel. Centralized surveillance room can easily communicate with on-the-ground security personnel, allowing for real-time coordination during security events or emergencies. One observer, surveillance observer in the room could be watching the incident. The other one could be gathering the video evidence. One can call law enforcement. One can be on the phone with security, working as a team in order to gather what is necessary. Again, evidence collection. In the event of disputes, theft, or other incidents, a centralized surveillance room can provide high-quality video evidence to assist investigation and legal proceedings. The ability of the state-of-the-art equipment with centralized conveniences that will allow gaming to see the video, but also working with them with the point-to-point secure connection. Next slide, please. So some of the disadvantages that we have: limited coverage. We have one observer, and it's very impossible to cover the entire casino floor. Gaming tables, cashier, conducting reviews, writing reports, observing fills and credits, and other items that are requirements that we need to watch and gather. So that limits the ability to get that coverage. inadequate response time. In the event of a single operator, I have one operator, they've got all these other things going on, and they also have a situation where they need to react quickly. Sometimes they freeze. What do I do first? Having multiple people there to work together, get through it, more efficient. Monitoring fatigue. Continuous monitoring of multiple screens and areas can lead to an operator's fatigue, and it causes a lot of stress for the observer. You know, they're watching, it's essentially watching a TV for 8 hours, but per whack, they only get a 30-minute break. So to me, it's watching TV 8 hours, and then for 30 minutes, you get to walk away from that. It's very strenuous, causes a lot of fatigue. A lot of observers have that issue. Lack of backup and support in the absence of additional operators. You know, you don't have somebody to what we call second eyes, a second opinion. Look at this. Am I seeing this correctly? Sometimes after watching for that long of a time, your eyes can play tricks on you. Am I really seeing this? Is this really what I'm observing? So that's also an issue. Risk of collusion. A single operator scenario. One operator, one observer who is watching this friend of theirs pocket money. Can happen. Only 2 people know about it, therefore the casino suffers. So that would decrease that as well. I will now turn it over to Kim McCabe.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you. I'm in charge of corporate compliance for the company. And so I've got over 30 years in gaming, and I've experienced centralized surveillance in many different jurisdictions. So hopefully I can answer you those kind of questions. But we'll go through what our experience is currently with our Nevada and Colorado properties. So in both of those states, we went through the regulatory approval process. And I know Tina and Bill have described some of that process. I'll go into further details here. But this presentation basically will highlight the benefits that we've experienced in having centralized surveillance in those areas. And you know, as far as the approval process, I will review that, but we did go through that. And each jurisdiction had their own set of requirements, of course, that we had to go through and get approvals for. So next slide, please. So in Colorado, as mentioned previously, it's through an ICMP process, and we have 3 properties there and a gas station that are currently under centralized surveillance. So we have one room that is monitoring all 4 of those areas, and they are not adjacent properties. The approval process there has already been described and explained to you, but I'm happy to answer any questions that we experienced as part of that approval process. Next slide, we can go on to Nevada. So in Nevada, as mentioned previously, it is a variance approval process. And there it is, it's pretty standardized, even though it's not in writing. So even prior to applying for it, the Nevada Gaming Control Board told us what criteria we would have to meet to gain approval there. And so even in our request letter, it kind of set forth a criteria that would be conditioned of our approvals. And so we went through that process. Also within Nevada, I know that it was mentioned, next slide, I'm sorry. Thank you. So with Nevada law, basically more than 15 million in gaming revenue, you have to maintain and operate that room on premise. So it has to be within the licensed location. And it has to be manned, and they are allowed a 1-hour break every 8 hours. So that's the rules for locations with 15 million or more in gaming revenue. And now for those properties with less than 15 million, it's maintained and operated from a secure location. That does not necessarily mean that it's on the licensed premise. And there's no requirement for a manned surveillance room at that point. So there has to be one person on property, which it could be a GM or anybody basically that could help operate and gain access to the room and have knowledge of the equipment. Now our properties currently in Nevada, we have 4, And there are approximately, we have 2 that are 120 miles away from our surveillance room, and we're currently operating centralized surveillance. So the standards here in Nevada, though, for 15 million or less in gross gaming revenue, basically you don't have to have a manned surveillance room. California law for card rooms is basically very similar to that. If you have under 31 tables, they're not requiring a manned surveillance room either. So do you have any questions so far about those jurisdictions I mentioned? There are other jurisdictions. We're still trying to gain some information to provide to the board. Virginia recently just approved Churchill Downs with 7 properties that aren't adjacent. So I'm trying to gain that information to provide to the board so that they can have that as well for reference. And next I'm going to discuss the topology. Yes, thank you. You're keeping up with me without me even saying next slide. Thank you. So centralized network topology. So this is basically, it's a secure transmission line, firewall, password protected from both ends. It ensures encrypted information, and it can be terminated at the host location. So that's very important. So that way, if you have any kind of breach or anything like that, you can terminate it from there. It's modeled after what we've already implemented in Nevada and Colorado. And the data is transferred via secure point-to-point tunnels utilizing 128-bit encryption between firewalls. Surveillance networks are restricted and isolated from other networks, so it's a segregated network from any other network within the properties. And each site's connected with fiber. So if you have any technical questions, we do have our head of IT here that could answer those questions. I'm definitely not the IT person, so do you have any questions regarding this? This is something further that we would discuss with the board prior to approvals and things like that, rulemaking, because we'd want to make sure that this is something agreeable to both sides, right? So, but we're already doing it now. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. So basically, in summary here, a centralized room provides an efficient, effective means of maintaining security, ensuring regulatory compliance, providing a safe and enjoyable environment for our guests and staff. Centralized surveillance monitoring systems designed to ensure gaming is conducted with honest, competitive, and safe environment. So in the past, you know, the networks, technology's come a long way, right? So in the past, and even when the WACs are written, you probably couldn't have foreseen where we are today. But the systems are very advanced, very secure. And next slide, please. So, I mean, you know, some systems even have where you have facial recognition and things like that. So, I mean, the technology has come a long way since the WACs were written. So what we're proposing is that we update the WACs and accommodate changes in for the changes in technology so that we can move forward with a centralized surveillance. And we do look forward to the further conversations that I know we'll have to get there. So with that being said, I think Eric's got something to add to the presentation. Do you have any questions for me? No? Okay. Step aside. Thank you.
Hi guys, so Eric Person, owner of Maverick. I think it might be helpful to sort of go back and talk about centralized surveillance, but let's sort of talk for a moment what surveillance agents do. And because I think there's a perception on TV and movies, and then there's like the reality of what surveillance agents actually do, and they're sort of different. And so here's what surveillance agents do in any jurisdiction I've been in, and I do have like 100 licenses. So I've been to like multiple countries and been in multiple states. But one thing that's universal, what surveillance agents do is they verify things like fills and credits on a table. They verify cage transactions. All of their requirements are outlined in the WACs as Washington, and they're pretty standard. And then that's the thing they do as a baseline. And then what happens is what they do is we say a bartender's stealing, or we think this table lost a lot of money, and I need you to take a look at it and make sure all the pays and takes were done properly, and that customers are getting a fair shake, and there wasn't like collusion between a dealer and a customer, for example. And that could go both ways, because a dealer could be stealing from a player, or a player could be in collusion with a dealer and stealing from the house. And so those take time, and they're not done in real time. They're done, you know, while the surveillance agent's sitting there and they're reviewing tape. And then sometimes there's things like money lending in Washington, for example. And we have a tape and there's a person lending money, and they go back and they find that. And then because that's a problem, it's illegal in the state, we would self-report. And a gaming agent in this world that we live today would drive from wherever they're at, and they'd go over to Lakewood. It's the last place it happened. And they'd get down there and they would get in the little booth and they would review the tape. And maybe they think, wow, this is really something. And so could I please have a copy? And they take a thumb drive. But when this started, it was a VHS tape. It was just a VHS tape in this room. But now they get, luckily, they still have to drive down there, but it's a little thumb drive and they can take it back wherever they want. And they use it as part of their investigative report. And maybe later they have to drive to another place and all day long. And, you know, so it's like, I think people think because of movies that there's a surveillance agent in the sky and he's watching in real time and this hand's been misset and someone's been paid when they shouldn't, and they catch it and they call down and they go, you paid that guy, but you shouldn't. That does not really happen. Very, 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 very rarely does that ever. We wish it. Well, maybe our deals are really perfect, so it never has to happen. But I sort of suspect it just doesn't happen that much. But what they do is they do a lot of work, and the work they do is these reports, and they help us find theft, and they help protect customers, and they help protect the business as well, and they help ensure that regs are enforced, because we all know that we have customers and team members that work for companies that sometimes aren't following the regs, and so we somehow get wind of it, and a surveillance agent assists that, typically with the Washington State Gambling Commission, and then we review that tape and we sort of administer how we should. And so what I would say was the purpose of centralized surveillance is, right now we have two realities, right? We have the reality of what really is today, which is where we find out somehow something bad has happened, and we ask our agents, Phyllis, working with, goes, hey, we heard something happened at Riverside, needs to review this tape, and then the agent makes a report and comes back. Based on that, we tell the gaming commission, or maybe it's not a commission issue. If it's not a commission issue, it's just a employee discipline, we would just deal with it. But if it's a commission issue, we'd notify the WSGC, and then their investigator would come out, and in conjunction, we'd do our investigation. But it's super inefficient, right? Because there's no reason that you have to have one person sitting in a very small room, which I would say is like 4 feet by 6 feet on average for our surveillance rooms, sitting all by themselves. And last time I was robbed in one of my properties in Macau, they were playing Candy Crush because they're in the room by themselves. We don't know if it was Candy Crush. Do you know if it was Candy Crush? But they were definitely not observing the robbery while they were in the room. I guess that's an issue of training, but really it's an issue of isolation. They're by themselves. They're in a room by themselves, 8 hours a day or so. And so by having centralized surveillance, we could have this reality, because what happened next after the robbery, some agent, I don't know which one, Tina might know, like drove down there and had to take a look. But if we had centralized surveillance, they could do it from their desk. This is like 2024, I think, and there's no reason to drive 40 minutes. Like when you're talking about the inefficiencies to breathe life and the things that Phyllis and Kim were talking about, this is part of the inefficiency. They actually have to drive there. And then when they drive there, they have to get a little thumb drive. Then they have to take that thumb drive back, and then they have to make a report. They could be sitting at their desk, which I would pay for. The card rooms would pay for this agent who's working with this. Like, we're happy to provide that. It's a better product. There is labor efficiency. It's fantastic, because you don't have to have one card room surveillance agent in each card room. Like, for whatever it's worth, it's a different state. California, there's only a few states that have card rooms. California is one. You don't even have to have live surveillance in most states. And that's because you're not catching live transactions. It's not that it's less secure. Like in like Nevada, for example, at my Red Garter, I don't have to have live surveillance. I have tables and I have slots, but I don't have a live surveillance agent. It's all being recorded. And yes, there's a GM who could get access to the room, but it's important to understand what is the purpose of a surveillance agent. And typically it's like to investigate, to review tape, to go through, and then to verify some things that are very clearly defined in the WAC, which is mainly the transferring of chips into the cage, or cage back into cash to a customer over certain large amounts. And so it's not really about having, one agent per card room. It's about having enough agents to sort of thoughtfully be able to do all the investigative services while providing the necessary WAC requirements so that people who come in and gamble in the state of Washington have a fair shake. And that, when they're supposed to get paid $1,000 because they have 1,000 in chips, they don't get 900. That's one of the things they do in the state. But you don't need one at every property. And you don't need your agents using their time driving to the property when they could just be sitting at a desk watching in real time live and providing some level. I believe they would actually provide some level of support and service. Actually, it'd be a better product because they might see, it's more eyes. They might happen to see things while they're, watching this in real time versus only watching things when they're notified by us, which is what happens now. My proposal would provide a direct access to the WSGC to review all of my tapes in real time. It's not tapes, coverage in real time. Tapes don't exist anymore. They existed when this reg made. But so did people riding around on horses, right? But now we have Teslas. So let's move forward, please. That's my proposal. Any questions? I'll sit down. Okay.
Questions or comments? Freddie and Aaron were both signed up for in-person, but you're with Maverick too, right? So is that just for questions or if necessary? Okay. So we're not decisions here today. That was just an update on the research requested. So thank you, everybody. I think that was helpful. Good information. If there's no other comments, then I think we can move forward. You have something?
What's going to happen next with this issue?
I don't know. That too. Where do we go? Where are we going from here, Tina, with respect to that issue?
We're continuing our discussion. It hasn't been 18 months yet, and we're continuing our discussion. I'll leave it to Maverick to.
I have a comment. I don't know. I don't know all the pros and cons associated with this yet and listen carefully, but I want to tell you that I visited early on in my tenure here, one of these rooms, and it was so dang depressing. I just couldn't imagine going to work every day and sitting alone in that little bitty room with those screens. It's not natural for human beings to be isolated for that long, alone, away from other people. And it's not reasonable to expect them to be able to pay attention to those screens. It would drive me crazy. I think it would drive you crazy after a while. And I came out of that room in one of the card rooms and I just felt so sorry. So that's my emotive contribution to this discussion at this point in the discussion. I don't know what the cons are here associated with this proposal, but I will tell you that that working condition I thought it was inhumane. It felt very unnatural. And I just, if I were hired in that job, I don't think I'd be able to do a good job in there. I wouldn't be able to focus because I need other people around me. Who doesn't? So for what it's worth, I will say that the nature by which, the way in which we currently do this work is not conducive to good mental health for those employees, in my unprofessional opinion. I'll say that.
Thank you.
That's all I have at this point.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Next, we will go to tab 9, the budget update with Crucinda.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, ex officios. For the record, my name's Crucinda Hanson, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the Gambling Commission. Today, I am here to give you a budget update. Next slide, please. So, as a precursor to the budget information I want to give you, I just want to give you an overview of where we were a year ago and how things are going, what we expected and how things are going. So a year ago, we met and we were before you and asked you to consider rulemaking to increase our fees because of projected revenue shortfalls. Through a series of tribal consultations and stakeholder meetings, we proposed a couple of different models. And by the end of all of those discussions, you all approved an increase in our fees that was sufficient for a single fiscal year revenue increase. We expected that the fee increase that we did to support us for the most part for this fiscal year. And just as a reminder, we increased fees on organizations, 60% increase. We did expect that we may have to still cover some of the gap between revenue and expenditures out of some of our available fund balance. And we did also note that we might have to come back and have discussions about fees for fiscal year 25, depending on how things went. Next slide, please. So as after that rule was approved, it was implemented it was effective prior to June 30. And when we were looking at those numbers, we assumed that there would be a 3% increase in the gross gambling receipts reported. That assumed increase was based on historical numbers. So if we looked at the growth rate of gross gambling receipts in prior years, in general, we saw about a 3% increase. So we assumed that would still happen. That reporting increase plus the fees being changed, we estimated would result in a $2 million revenue increase. And as I mentioned previously, that we would use any available fund balance to supplement the revenue and expenditure gap. When that rule went into effect, it had a rolling implementation because the licensees were not subject to the new rates until their licenses were renewed. And so why that's important is because it will take an entire year before we know the full effect of the increased fees because our organizations renew quarterly. So as they renew, then the first quarter they file after their renewal, they're subject to those higher quarterly rates. So next slide, please. So at this point, we're in January, so we only have 1 quarter of data to look at for these increased rates. So this slide is a comparison of what we saw in 2022 quarter 3 compared to what we saw in 2023 quarter 3 calendar quarter. So as I mentioned previously, we anticipated seeing a 3% increase in gross gambling receipts reported. We actually saw those numbers fall just over 4.5%. Our number of licenses that filed that filed quarterly licensing reports stayed relatively stable, but because of the reduction in the reported gross gambling receipts, we only saw a revenue increase of just over $20,000. And when we rolled these out, this first quarter of filing represents about 30% of our licensees that are filing. Next slide, please. So this graph plots our year-to-date revenue and our year-to-date expenditures. I would like to note that the expenditures do not include our costs for IT modernization or the website redesign because we're not using current year revenue for those projects. We're currently using money set aside in our fund. So it's challenging to tell, but if you were to add up all of our revenue and you add up all of our expenditures, we're about $150,000 in the black right now. Our expenditures will continue to increase because we have been successful in being able to fill some of our vacancies. So right at the end of November, we had 98 employees, and we anticipate that continuing to increase to hopefully be fully staffed at 114 employees for the new fiscal year. So the expenditures will continue to increase. Next slide, please. So for our expenditures for the current fiscal year, the previous graph, those numbers, our expenditures are about 89% of what we expected to see. If we were at 100% of what we projected our expenditures to be, we'd be about $450,000 in the red right now. We see some of those expenditure costs because we're not staffed at the level that we expected to be at this point. Although we did have 98 employees at the end of November, we expected to have 107. We've also been very prudent about our discretionary travel. Finding virtual training, some conferences staff have been able to attend virtually, which has significantly reduced the travel expenditures that we have. The other two savings areas that we've seen so far are really a delay of those expenditures. We anticipated having some significant equipment purchases by now, but because of supply chain issues and some worker strikes, those types of things, we're just now being able to procure some equipment. And then we are also working on a records management system. And our initial timeline at the time we created our budget anticipated having acquired that software by now, but our project timeline had to shift. So that is also a delay in expenditure. Next slide, please. So our fund balance review, at the beginning of this fiscal year, which started July 1, we had $19.1 million in our fund. By looking at our year-to-date revenue and expenditures, and that gets us, if you did all that math, which I didn't display up there, our balance as of the end of November before our reserved funds was about $18.7 million. And so then we have a reserved funds. The first is the requirement from OFM for us to have a working capital reserve. That's about a quarter's worth of our anticipated expenditures, the $5.25 million. We have, as I referenced prior, we have money set aside for our IT modernization project. That was originally 9.1. We're working through that project, so we're down to about 8.6, 8.7 million set aside for that project. And then our website redesign, we had funding set aside. As of the end of November, we still had $26,000 or so reserved. You are probably familiar that our new website went live in mid-December, but because of delays in invoicing and how that works, we won't be fully invoiced for that project until February. And we anticipate that there will not be leftover funds from that project. We're currently working on procuring a new access control system for this building. We've got that budgeted at $80,000, so we want to set that money aside to make sure we can pay for that. And then the records management system that I referred to, we have $300,000 set aside to buy that software and get it implemented. So after that, if you do all that math, that gets us to $4.38 million. For reference, when I was before you in July for the budget proposal that you approved, our fund balance was $5 million. So next slide, please. When I was before you in July and you approved the budget, the fiscal year 25 budget was $20.5 million. And I just wanted to review what it already includes. It includes being fully staffed for the entire year. And with those fully staffed, it includes the 3% salary increase that we knew about that was approved by the legislature. It also included the central service agency increases. And for anyone that isn't familiar, those are the DES and WATEC and Secretary of State, all those services that we have to pay for. We can't procure the services anywhere else. We don't get to negotiate. We included those increases as well based on what was in the budget passed last year by the legislature. And then for all of those other expenditures that we have that aren't mandated through those two things, we built in a general increase of 2% because costs always go up. So all of those things are already included in the 20.5 million. Next slide, please. These are our unknowns. So when I reviewed the fund balance, I said that we have money set aside to purchase and implement a record management system. That will not be something that we build in-house. We'll be buying it from someone. So we will have to pay annual license fees to keep that system working. We don't know what kind of costs those will be yet. We also don't know what the final supplemental budget will be that's passed by legislature, but we do know that the governor's budget showed an additional $800,000 in expenditures for us. And then for our IT systems replacement, we have about $8.6 million still set aside for that project. We have a request for information out right now. Vendors are supposed to get back to us, or they will get back to us by Monday the 15th. And part of what we've asked for is an estimated cost to replace that legacy system that we're working on. So we're not sure of what that actual cost will be yet. If it comes in above 8.6, we haven't budgeted for that. And then the annual license fees for that system also are not yet budgeted for because we don't know what those might look like. Related to our IT systems replacement, currently we have in-house systems that help us with our asset management and our fleet management. We're currently researching costs for those replacement systems and the ongoing licensing fees for those as well, but we don't yet know what those costs might be. That is the end of my presentation. So my last slide. Questions?
Yeah, I have a couple questions, things that I might have been told before, but I forgot. Does the central service agencies and that include our legal fees?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then for the working capital reserve, the OFM requirement, how is that number determined? Is it a percentage or a?
So OFM doesn't dictate how much of a working capital reserve we have to have. Ours is for 3 months. Since our revenue is cyclic on the quarter, that's a 3-month reserve for us. I would also note, just for clarification, the difference between central services and our attorney general bill. Central services, those are set in the budget. We're billed by FTE. It doesn't change. The AGO bill, we're billed based on how many hours we use. So that bill does fluctuate. The central services do not.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anybody else have any questions?
So the general increase 2% for expenditure, can you help it, like 2% of what number?
Oh, so over what was budgeted for fiscal year 24. So for example, utility costs, when we proposed our budget for fiscal year 24, we looked at what it had been and what the rate of increase was, and then just kept that moving along for the next year. So. Those are in the, it's all, yes, so it's already budgeted because that was defined by the budget that was passed by legislature. So yes, those have already been accounted for. Yeah. Other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. The next is tab 10. The fee increase with Lisa McLean.
Lisa McLean, tab 10 is regarding the subject that, or follow on to what Christina was just discussing. Given the budget, the fact that 5 months of revenue and expenditure data with our new fee changes, with the new fees, show that we're not collecting enough revenue. We think that we're not going to have enough money. We may not have enough money to sufficient funds to cover licensing, regulation, and enforcement needs. And so therefore, staff is recommending to initiate rulemaking to address license fee increases to cover the costs of licensing, regulation, and enforcement. And I think, with permission, I just say we need to open this topic in order to get new fees in place by June. But at the same time, as we collect more revenue, if the budget situation were to change, I'm sure that Christina will be here with us in the coming months. If we feel that we find that we don't need to increase the fees, we can always retract the rule initiation of the rulemaking. Right. So, does anybody have any questions of myself or my colleagues, Christina, who has remained behind?
Yeah, so to go through a fee increase rulemaking process, 4 months, something like that, 4 or 5 months. I mean, having them effective by that July quarter is just like gives us the biggest bang for the buck, right? I mean, really, we could do this at any quarter and affect new licensees that will be renewing at that September quarter, January, October quarter, January quarter.
Sure. So Chrisinda here again. Yes. So 30% of our organizational licenses that file quarterly licensing reports renew effective. Their licensors are effective July 1 of each year. So a rule that goes into effect prior to July 1, the increase would be effective on the greatest number of licensees that renew in that quarter. But yet, essentially, yes, if we miss the July 1 deadline, then it would be effective the next quarter and just follow the cycle until it would be fully effective then September of the following year. Yes.
Any other questions?
So staff also be doing an analysis of how the fee increases might possibly affect the legitimacy of these businesses that we depend on for this money. Well, I mean, if there's going to be an increase in their fees, how does that affect them? I mean, how does that affect their ability to continue? I know that they've been a lot of them have been shutting their doors. I mean, I think there's a consistent history of them shutting their doors. There's fewer and fewer of them. If we depend upon them for our existence, and in order for us to continue to function well, we have to generate revenue from them. If we raise the fees, are we potentially jeopardizing the goose that's laying our golden egg? And what can we do about that if that's the case? I mean, I don't know if it is the case, but it feels like there's a cyclical problem here to me. So I think that it would be interesting to do some brainstorming about what kinds of rules and regulations we should be considering that might reduce impact on these businesses that we depend on so that they can afford these fee increases so that we can continue to exist to regulate them. See? So I think that it's not just raising fees, it's a whole bunch of different things that go together here. Just throwing that out.
Saw some of this in the discussion that we had about raising the wager limits several months ago, and there was a graph that was put together that showed the number of at least house bank card rooms over time.
Mhm.
And it showed that it peaked at one point, I think in 2009, and it's been steadily declining ever since. So I don't see that there's a direct correlation between our fees and the number of at least house bank card rooms, because our fees were our fees, and it didn't make a difference in the number of house bank card rooms in that graph that we saw.
Mhm.
So I understand your concerns, but I don't know if I see the facts that support it, the data that support it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm asked. I don't see it either. And that's what I'm wondering is if we will ask for that. I just think that we should be cognizant of the effect. I know that we want to solve our own problem here. We have to be able to continue to operate legitimately, but I think that we should be aware of the full potential impact that this action might have. So it's a rhetorical question at this point.
So, I mean, I am not interested in an across the board fee increase rule at this point. And actually, I don't ever want to be for an across the board fee increase. And so, I mean, I think if we look at the factors, I'm, a little bit of it, it's science and gut. I mean, I'm the whole process of trying to figure this stuff out. And, we want to hit it right. So I think, there is, some tipping point where if the fee goes up enough, somebody's going to make a decision not to continue doing that activity. So, the one thing, when we created this system, we established base rates, percentages, and then a max fee that was the maximum that activity could pay in a license year. So I think we saw, a little bit with the increase that we did last year, everything was uniform except for the electronic raffles, and staff had good data that had those increase quite a bit more than what the across the board and every other activity were. So, I am, I think I'm pretty positive that we're not going to probably see a repeat of this quarter in, whatever 6 weeks or so from now when we see the next quarter's numbers. I don't know if there's, taking a half an afternoon to survey various licensees out there and ask them, hey, is your second quarter going to be way better than your first quarter? Or, or this last quarter versus the prior quarter? I don't know if we can do a little bit of survey stuff that would boost our confidence or, lower our confidence, I guess, in what that next quarter is going to do. But we've got to start sometime, and I don't know any better time, but we need to look at activities individually. We need to pick a couple of activities and evaluate them over the next 6 months. And if an adjustment's appropriate for within that activity, then that's the rule that we adopt. So I feel confident that if we heard, a proposal from staff for, hey, okay, we're going to look at these 2 activities or 3 activities or 2 activities and individual licenses, and then we can just do the work on those, and then next year we can do a couple more. So and if I guess it would be the March commission meeting, we have a repeat of this quarter or this, the quarter of data that we have, then yeah, okay, maybe we might have to do something, but then we'll still have time to make that effective in September. And that's for, you know, having people fall into it when they have the beginning of their license year. Another thought that I have, and this was an assumption I made when we did this last year, was that everybody's rates would go up when this was effective. So even if you weren't renewing your license, that when you paid your quarterlies, you'd be paying on the new rate. So that's something I'd like staff to be able to look into and see if, you know, is it prohibited to increase the rate mid-license year? And if so, should we do legislation so that we can change that? So, yeah, I mean, for me, I had to swallow it last year and do it across the board, and I didn't like it. I don't want to do it again. So, I mean, if we start it and we have, you know, the rulemaking begins, I'm certainly going to work in good faith to, you know, not do it as an across the board, and try to figure out maybe just a couple things that need to be tweaked. But yeah, I mean, I'll work with everyone if we end up initiating this rulemaking, but I can't support it.
So there's a lot of work that has to be done, but then it begs the question, if we did those tweaks that you're alluding to, would that be enough
to generate the revenue?
So there's work to be done.
Commissioners, can I add something I forgot to add, is that last night and during the meeting today, we've received 2 comments. They're related to electronic raffles. They're coming from the electronic raffles in sort of objecting to the idea. We've printed that out, and it's in your desk. We have one from the sports teams and another from David Trout of Bump. Yes, guys, so sorry, didn't mean to interrupt the flow of debate here. Just wanted to make sure I got that in.
Thank you. And Vicki, yeah. Well, you did tell me the other day that, so I was ready for it already.
Crack in the seed box.
In the future, I will sign up.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. I'm Vicki Christopherson on behalf of Maverick Gaming, and I just want to weigh in here and first thank Commissioner Patterson and Commissioner Sizemore for your comments. I think you're getting at exactly, I think, where we are. We have never opposed a fee increase and don't really want to, but we do look forward to really thoughtful conversations and hopefully collaboration with the industries that you regulate to figure out how to create a more sustainable future here. There are economic pressures. We're all feeling them. You're feeling them and we're feeling them. And the other licensees that you've heard from are feeling them. And I think we all come to this wanting the commission to be healthy and wanting our businesses to be healthy. So we would really like to work with you. And so hopefully this initiation of rulemaking, if it occurs, can include licensees in a conversation on how we can better ensure stable funding for you and keep our businesses stable as well. And we look forward to that work.
Yes.
You have Fred Riviera signed up and he is available for public comment as well.
Who?
Fred Rivera from the Mariners.
Sorry.
We're on tab 10.
I see, yes.
Thank
Got it.
you.
Okay, Fred.
Yeah. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Fred Rivera, Executive Vice President with Mariners. Thank you for taking this testimony and for considering this issue. The Seattle Mariners started our 50-50 raffle last season, the 23 season, and some of the other teams that started it before. It's been a successful effort to raise funds that go directly into our community. For the Mariners, to focus on improving access to baseball and softball in underserved communities, building fields, providing programming and been able to impact the lives of thousands of kids through the funding that we've raised. The licensing costs of operation as they currently are without any increase are not insignificant, and they do have an impact on our operations, combined with what are really arcane rules and laws for operating 50/50 raffles. That combination makes it very difficult to get funding back into our community. And so I would ask that the commission consider not only fees, but also the rules and laws that we have to operate under. We made some effort to have some rule changes during the last meeting. Considered the request to just consider those rules was denied by the majority of the commission, and so we'll be operating next season under the old rules written several decades ago. We'll figure out another way to try to get modernization efforts. But in summary, I'd ask the ruling for the fee increase be considered in context with some of the other challenges that we have to operate with funding in short. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Any other comments, discussion? Commissioners? Motion?
Well, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, please, Tina, or Suzanne. If we initiate rulemaking now, we end up with better data next month or 3 months from now, we can pull back our rulemaking. Is that correct?
That's correct. You can withdraw from rulemaking at any point up practically till an enactment of the rule.
Okay.
It would be a
And
repeal.
how long is the rulemaking process?
So while there's certain statutory guidelines, a lot of this is driven by the code revisor deadlines for filing. Practically, it generally takes about 5 to 6 months. But there's really only a few set timelines in statute. So it's really more, you need to let 30 days pass from the CR 101 to the CR 102, and then it's 20 days from the CR 102 to the rule hearing are the only firm guideline, and then 30 days from the CR 103 to the enactment of the rule. Sorry.
You have to add in between the 101 and the 102, while there only has to be 30 days until you can have the hearing, there are 2 weeks that are imposed by the code revisor for publication.
Okay.
So
And so this is the practical with the statutory requirements.
So if you were to initiate rulemaking today, the earliest you could have a hearing for a 102 would be March. And then the earliest you could have the 103 hearing would be, or take final action would be in May.
Okay.
And then at the earliest, it would be 31 days after filing with the code revisor for an effective date, which would be depending on when we filed that 103, because we do have to compile for the concise explanatory statement, et cetera. It would probably be mid to late June.
Okay.
Question?
But there is an emergency rulemaking also, right?
We've never qualified for that, basically for almost any purpose.
Okay.
There are narrow grounds for emergency rulemaking
Okay.
that are generally based upon health, safety, and welfare
I've seen.
under the APA.
Okay.
Okay.
You have a question?
So if we don't initiate rulemaking, what other vehicle do we have? What can we do instead of initiating this rulemaking to begin to have very serious conversations about how to address this financial situation? What else could we do?
Just we can talk about stuff, but I mean, we can talk about ways to reduce regulation. But that ultimately would initiate, be some sort of rulemaking, because a majority of our budget is staff. And so if if we don't have the funds for staffing, if we're talking big dollars here, which we are, you know, I think only 10 to 15% of our budget is discretionary in terms of, you know, should we do travel or should we get some office expenses? So I think at that point, you know, our role is a regulatory agency. And so that would have to reduce our regulatory efforts.
Yeah. But my question was, what else could we do besides rulemaking? So it sounds like you don't have, just the general conversation was your answer, right? So here's the thing. I wish that we could signal that we weren't just going to be looking at increasing fees, but that we were going to initiate a process whereby we were going to look at raising fees, but also we were going to look at other things that we might do through the regulatory process to address this situation. You know, I don't know what it would be. Ways to alleviate the burdens, the financial burdens that that we may be placing on them through our regulations or rules. You know, other ideas other than just raising fees. I'd like to see us have a broad discussion about all that together in tandem at the same time. And so if we go ahead and move forward, and I'm glad to make the motion so that we can continue to talk. But I think that one thing that would be really reassuring is if you said that that conversation would happen through this process.
Certainly the commissioners can have a work session so that you can hear that conversation as well. I mean, we've had work sessions before. I think I wasn't part of them during the fee restructure, but we have the benefit of Commissioner Sizemore, who was very involved in those work sessions. It's my recollection. We can certainly have conversations about seeking some sort of sustainable funding through the legislature, but reducing, and if you are open, but I don't want to have open conversations with licensees about ways to reduce our regulatory requirements if that's ultimately not where commissioners are wanting to go.
Maybe not.
If we reduce our regulatory requirements, then that reduces the number of staff, which then reduces our budgetary requirements. So I'm trying to piece, how can we reduce the economic burden on our licensees to solving our economic problem as an agency? So I'll need a little bit of help how to link that conversation.
Yeah, I guess maybe I would consider, you know, if we move forward or whatever, but then asking staff to come back to us and we could do a work session or something, but with their ideas of, you know, different things that can change, or, you know, different ideas of how we can go about stuff. And then we could all kind of discuss, you know, have Christinda and, you know, Tina and whomever else needs to be involved kind of come back with, here's kind of some ideas, suggestions, things we could do, but we really don't want to do, that, you know what I mean? And then we'd kind of have a starting point to then be able to talk more thoroughly about it.
I like that idea.
But are you thinking of doing that as like through the rulemaking process? Like we initiate rulemaking, and then as part of our rulemaking process, we're going to not only hear from licensees as to what their projected impacts are, but also hear from commission staff as to other avenues to reduce our expenditures, or to balance our budget besides just increasing fees.
I think we could do it that way, but I don't know. I'll put that up to other people if they want to do the rulemaking, and you know, get it so that way that always provides a little extra pressure to get conversations going, I think, but that's not always good either. So I don't know.
Well, if I may, so you know, since, you know, we did the fee restructure, I mean, last year, because we just did some across the board increases, I don't know the correlation now between, and I'll just pull one that was really askew when we, you know, initially did the fee restructure, was manufacturers. So manufacturers were making millions and millions and millions of dollars in this state and paying pennies, or less than a penny. They were paying very small, very low licensing fees. And again, maybe that's not a lot of work for the agency, regulatory work for the agency, but because we're dual role, regulation plus criminal enforcement, everybody's got to pay some portions of that criminal enforcement piece as well. So I'm really curious, like and this is kind of my suggestion earlier is I'm really curious of, who is like gross gambling receipts versus what they're paying in regulatory costs by activity. And then also, are there outliers within activities that we are not capturing because our max license fee just isn't high enough? So those of us that were around, we had the Seattle hockey or whatever within the nonprofits that was like this outlier of way high gross gambling receipts compared to every other nonprofit similarly situated. And so we worked, and that was part of the whole creating a maximum license fee within that. So, that's the data I want to use to make a determination and like evaluate whether we have particular activities that are overburdened or underburdened for keeping the lights on and keeping the work going on. So, I get it. Our budgets have to meet our statutory obligations. And yeah, even if there's no crime in a particular activity, that activity still, based on the Gambling Act, has a responsibility to pay for illegal activity in gambling. So yeah, I guess we can start down this path. I certainly do not want to have a repeat of 2014 when, we did it across the board at that point, and then we did layoffs, and then a bunch of other people quit because they were mad because their friend got laid off or whatever. So, I don't want to overreact. I think we should be, cognizant that we had a bad quarter, way off from our projections. But I don't think that we need to panic. But I also don't want to be lagging behind. So, it feels like staff should be able to, maybe whether there's rule making beginning or not, feels like we should be able to have some other data by this time next month, right?
Yes, our month, to be quite honest, what do we have planned for the next few weeks? All of our energies are going to be focused on RFI, and what our next ask is going to be whether or not you're going to allow us potentially to move forward with seeking a budget proviso if that RFI number is greater than what we have set aside. So, if that's a no, then
right,
we got a lot of time. So, but that's going to be our focus in the next few weeks, because we have a very short time period with the legislature to try to get that late ask across the board, across the finish line. So, as you mentioned, in 2014, with the reduction of staff that we had to take, we have never been able to attain the number that we tried to go down to. And so we're at 97 FTE, and, we have one person leaving on Friday. So again, we just keep, we haven't made it to that level yet. So I would love to say we'll have some numbers, right? We'll be able to say what comes in terms of revenue and where we're at with the RFI. Much more than that, I do not want to overpromise, because we have to be back here on is it the 14th or the 8th? Yeah, so it's a short turnaround this month.
Yeah, so just to add to what Tina said, if the ask is just, hey, what are the preliminary numbers for the filing that was due January 31st? We can provide that, but as you know, Director Griffin just referenced, I won't have enough time, nor will the statewide accounting system be caught up enough to do a really thorough analysis of the, so it would just be preliminary numbers just to kind of give a peek of where we might be compared to, you know, the quarter that we just had, and maybe a little bit more of an update of what we expected versus what we're seeing. But there won't be sufficient time to have the data to do a thorough analysis before the next meeting. So I just wanted to offer that. Thank you.
A lot of work to be done here.
There is a lot of work to be done. Oh. Do we have a motion? Sounds like we might have to push a lot of stuff to March based on the conversation we just heard. So I don't know if that affects anything. The open making or
Well, I mean, do we have any choice other than to initiate the process here? I mean, it doesn't hurt to see what we can learn by initiating the process, right?
Right. I mean, we're looking at a 6-month window to gather information, and if at the last minute it turns out we don't, or we found other ways to get around it, then we just pull it back. I kind of see it as no harm, no foul.
But it's a good conversation about how complicated, I mean, it helps us to see how complicated this is going to become. So I move, Madam Chair, if you want a motion now to initiate rulemaking proceedings on this topic so that we can have a broader discussion.
I'll second.
and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, motion passes. We will now take a
Nay.
break.
Too late.
Oh,
But votes nay.
sorry.
No worries. No, that's perfectly fine. I just, yeah, to the extent that we can focus in on a couple of these, I think that very easily, not very easily, very likely could fix some inequities and put us in a where we're comfortable with our financial situation.
Well, hopefully in a better place.
Crossing my fingers. So.
When I take a 10-minute break. Thank you. Okay, great. All right, we are back. We will move right into tab 11, which is the HBCR financial statements with Lacey McLean.
Afternoon, Lisa McLean. This is a petition that we received from Tim Gorell of Black Pearl Casino of Spokane, Washington, or Spokane Valley, Washington. I'm sorry, I have a cough that keeps recurring. So I have a lozenge in my thing. So I'm sorry. He wants to amend WAC 230-15740, which is the WAC entitled Preparing Required Financial Statements. Basically, the rule is that depending upon the level of your gross receipts, you have to either hire a CPA to audit your financial statements, review them, or compile them. This current limits are, if you have gross receipts over 6 million, you have to have them audited. 1 to 6 million, you have them reviewed. Less than 1 million, you have them compiled. The petitioner says that because of the inflationary cycle, it's very expensive to hire an auditor. When this rule was set up, the cost of a professional auditor was about $10,000, and nowadays he says that the cost of an auditor is $35,000 to $40,000. You'll see here in the policy considerations, we give you some information about how this would impact. So how many audited financial statements would we get? Based on the reported card revenues from 2022, instead of having 13 card rooms, we'd have six audits. Instead of having 19 card rooms giving us reviewed financial statements, we'd have 24. And instead of 7, we'd have 9 giving us compiled financial statements. Then there's a chart here that gives you an idea of what happens in terms of from the CPA and from the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants perspective. What is the value of an audit, a review, a compilation? Okay, in terms of assurance, process, and usefulness. I'll let you review that by yourselves. The commission relies on these reports from the CPA to assure that the information it receives annually is an accurate representation of the licensee's financial situation. And as you drop from audit to review to compilation, the assurance of that information and its accuracy drops as well. So under the requirements of the APA, the commission needs to take action. Staff is recommending that you deny the petition as the current thresholds are important to maintain the commission's ability to get the correct level of CPA assurance based on the licensee's card room gambling revenues. It is possibility that the petitioner, Tim Gorell, is here. He was informed. I communicated with him yesterday, but I have not seen him online. I don't know if Nicole sees him.
And he did sign up to testify.
I have unmuted him and given him camera access, but I have not checked with him to make sure it's working yet.
Hello, is it working?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Hello.
Hello. Did you want to testify or say anything?
Yeah, hold on. It's kind of delayed. I'm sorry. I'm trying to catch up here and see you at the same time. Yeah, so we're just proposing that we take a look at these 3 points in this WAC and see if it makes sense to change this to a different threshold. And that's all we're asking, really.
Okay. Anyone have any questions or comments? No? All right. Do we have any motions? Everybody's still awake.
Children missing a cookie. I move to deny the petition because the current thresholds are important to maintain the commission's ability to get the correct level of CPA insurance.
All right. And motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion passes. Thank you. Next, we will move to tab 12, which is sports wagering.
Yes, tab 12 is based on a petition that we received from Austin Zeck of Spanaway, Washington. He proposes the expansion of sports wagering to include online and mobile or app-based wagering, either under tribal control only or allowing private enterprises to become licensed to accept wagers. He thinks that this would be a good change to allow residents to participate in sports gambling from the comfort of their own homes, especially when they live far away from a tribal casino. This, as you know, there's RCW 946-0364, which says that sports wagering should take place on Indian lands. 946-0368 says that you cannot transmit gambling information over the internet. So based on those considerations, staff recommends that the commission deny this petition in writing because the request is contrary to statute and would require legislative action.
Questions or comments?
Yeah. The petitioner had hoped to be here, but he had a family emergency, so he's not here.
Okay, thank you. I don't see anyone signed up there, so. No, nothing. Does anybody have a motion?
I move to deny the request because it is outside the purview of this uh, agency, this body. It's up to the legislature.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? No? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes. Thank you. And then I have a question, Director Griffin. I have someone signed up to talk in tab 14, but my material only goes to 13. So is this person for?
General public comment.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, so tab 13 is legislative updates.
So Lisa McLean, Legislative and Policy Manager on the legislative update. First off, I'd say that in the event, at the very beginning of this meeting, we welcomed Representative Eric Robertson, who is our new ex officio from the House Republican side. He replaces Skylar Rude. I'm not sure that he's still here, but I know that Director Griffin this week had a chance to meet with him, and he's on our committee related to regulated substances and gambling and gaming, so that will be useful. Second thing, the legislature started on Monday, as you know. It's a short session. In here, I put the cutoff dates. I will say that I guess I was anticipating I counted wrong on the 60 days. So I was planning on going to Hawaii on the 6th, but I guess I'll have to stick around until the 7th. I'm teasing. So signing dies not on the 6th, as it says in the memo. It's actually on the 7th. Okay. So March. Yeah. Okay. And you'll see that the policy cutoff is House of Origin policy cutoff is January 31st. House of Origin fiscal cutoff is the 5th. Okay. Yeah. I've also put here, just to remind you, what our committees are in the Senate and the House and who are the members of those committees. So you have that. I guess as part of this legislative update, we still don't know the outcome of the RFI that we have for IT modernization. As Christina said, we're getting that information back on Monday. But we would like to come to you and ask you for your approval to pursue a budget proviso. So in the event that we need it, because if we need it, we need to move quickly. We need to get that probably set in the House on by the 29th of January and in the Senate by the 2nd of February. So we're lining all that up. So we'd like to have that. Maybe I'll just put out all the different things I have to say and then throw it to you guys for asking questions. Second thing I would say is that I've listed, we've gone through our pre-filed bills. There's about approximately 400, maybe 500 now. I've made a list of the pre-filed bills that relate to us here in this memo. The first one is AHB 1961, which would expand the seriousness of animal cruelty in the first degree beyond just sexual offenses against animals. And if adopted, the bill would assign a level 3 seriousness also to animal cruelty cases that could inflict harm or injury or even death at illegal animal fighting events. Something, maybe a tool that we would be given. That is already had a hearing. It's in the House Committee, Community Safety and Justice Committee, and it's scheduled for exec session on January 18th. Second bill that we have in the packet is creating a gambling treatment diversion pilot program. This is a bill proposed by Representative Stearns and Representative Orwell. It's a possibility he's here. I did let him know that we were going to be presenting this. This was one of the recommendations of the Problem Gambling Task Force. It's about setting up a pilot program within the Administrative Office of Courts to conduct a gambling treatment diversion court pilot program as a way to treat persons who are determined to be affected by having a gambling disorder, addictive disorder related to gambling. Okay. And then the third bill that we have noticed is HB 2027 and the companion SB 5905. This is concerning the certification, background check, and training requirements for sheriffs, police chiefs, marshals, reserves officers, and volunteers. This would basically require that the chiefs of these agencies would be required to have the same background checks and training and certification that the people that they oversee, the agents that they oversee, the police officers that they oversee. Unfortunately, the way that it's written is it only refers to general authority peace officers, which is not us as but defined by 1093-020. So already Director Griffin has been meeting with a number of different representatives to point this out, and we're hoping that maybe there might be a fix there to include the limited authority Washington peace officer, because we'll just be back where we were last year, where we want to be held to the same standards that the general authorities are. So we wanted to see if, number one, you would give us authority to seek a budget proviso. Number two, if you wanted to state an opinion on the HB 1961 concerning animal cruelty in the first degree. And number three, if you wanted to state an opinion on HB 2055, creating a gambling diversion court program, pilot program. Furthermore, sorry, three more things. I gave to you three bills that dropped last night. There's House Bill 2317 from Representative Orcutt, which is basically increasing the gross revenue threshold for unlicensed bingo, raffle, and amusement games, and also raising the threshold at which they want to pay taxes. It's just taking everywhere it says 5,000 and raising it to 15,000. Okay. That was just dropped last night. The second thing that's been dropped, and I make a reference to it here, I raised in the memo, I raised some of the bills that died in the last session, but they could be revived. And one of them was SB 5704 concerning requirements for fundraising activities of bona fide charitable organizations. This was dropped last year, and we had some concerns with it. We met with the senator who had proposed it, and then we started working with the people who were behind that, and that's what got that nonprofit raffle rule that we've been working on with you all. But there were a bunch of things inside of the rule petition that they gave to us that we couldn't address because it was beyond our statutory mandate. And so what the bill 6183 is to address some of those changes. One of the things they wanted to do was increase the price of a raffle ticket. They wanted to enable the selling, people to be hired to sell raffle tickets. They wanted to be able to sell tickets over the phone or the internet, to increase the thresholds for unlicensed raffle and bingo, similar to what's in this HB 2317. And a lot of the things that we've talked about, I can go into more detail if you're interested. So that's what this is. And then there's another bill also from Senator Rivers, 6190, also coming from the group of nonprofits, which is basically defining sweepstakes and authorizing sweepstakes as something that we could regulate. And like sweepstakes, we're not entirely clear how this works, but we probably need to read this more carefully, as we hadn't had time to since last night, and read it, analyze it very closely. We want our licensing and reg people to weigh in on it. So there's what I have to say. We'd like to hear what you have to say about a budget proviso, about the two bills that we've pointed out, animal cruelty and court diversion program. And I don't think we yet have need for you to weigh in on the bills that dropped last night. Yes.
Full information. Does anyone have any questions or comments about anything?
I have a comment. If no one else. Thanks, Madam Chair. I would strongly recommend that we express our support for the animal fighting in the first degree bill that's before the state legislature, and also the bill that Representative Chris Stearns has dropped, and that would provide this gambling treatment court diversion program. I think that's something that's really desperately needed in our state. So people that are committing crimes and who are addicted to gambling have an avenue whereby they can get treatment. And that bill is House Bill 2055. I don't know what the other number was.
1961.
1961. So that's my motion.
Okay, I think
Were there any other bills that you didn't?
Need a motion. Yeah.
Yes, you can.
I would also like to add that we need to authorize staff to seek a budget proviso for the IT modernization program if the results of the RFI indicate the need for it.
That's friendly.
Friendly, yeah.
Okay. Yes.
And part of that too, or do you just want that and or that?
So I think the and is backwards, but yes. So Chair Patterson moved to authorize, or sorry, Vice Chair Patterson, I apologize. I move to authorize the chair on behalf of the commission to write to the relevant committees expressing support for HB 1961 and 2055. And the amendment was to move to authorize staff to seek a budget proviso for the IT modernization program if the results of the RFI indicate the need for it.
That's it.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved, amended, full motion seconded. It's fun.
Quick question before we vote.
Yeah.
I spoke on Monday. No, I don't think so. I have only testifying about concerns of undoing what they so generously passed in 1132. It seems to be moving, but no, I'm not speaking on saying supportive or, yeah, just speaking to concerns. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question for Tina. Tina, if this passes, you'll be testifying on behalf of the Gambling Commission for the animal cruelty bill, as well as the gambling treatment court diversion program.
Correct. Yeah. So 1961 was heard at the committee. I did not speak to that. I spoke to House Bill 2027 because at that time I didn't have any concerns and I couldn't speak in support yet. But as soon as it goes and moves on for further testimony, I will. Yes.
I wonder, should we let them know that the Gambling Commission is supportive now?
Yes.
We missed the opportunity to say it in public, right?
Right. So we'll send the letters of support to the prime sponsor as well as Representative Goodman, who's chair of the committee.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that pilot treatment court diversion program, that was one of the gambling task force's recommendations.
Yes. And then we'll definitely track that bill as well. I mean, we're tracking it now, but yes, I was going to speak on that anyway. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion that authorizes staff to seek a budget proviso for the IT modernization program. Results of the RFI indicate the need for it. And to authorize the chair on behalf of the commission to write relevant committees expressing support for the HB 1961 and HB 2055. So that's the motion, correct?
Correct.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Okay, and now we're going to have general public comments. We have Christian Hill. Are they here?
I believe he may have been here earlier, but so I don't know if he's attending virtually.
Yeah, I think he was here.
Is that the gentleman you spoke to? I think.
Okay. All right, well, that takes care of our agenda items for today. So we will now adjourn. Oh, I see a hand up. Or am I seeing things?
It was someone entering the meeting.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we will now adjourn at 2:26 p.m. We will resume the meeting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. at this same Lacey office of the Gambling Commission, and virtually through Teams. Thank you, everybody, for joining.